Chapter 984. Poplar Fruit couldn't wait for the next day. At around 2 o'clock in the morning, he drove the Land Rover on the dark highway. He wanted to rush to Jiangnan overnight. Poplar Fruit really took this matter seriously this time. He looked for Big Brother He overnight and asked him to find someone to protect Fong Beibei and Kiki. He also informed Zheng Yujie to be careful. Lisa Chow wasn't easy to deal with. Poplar Fruit was worried that this was a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. With the special forces protecting the most important people in his heart, he could go to Jiangnan without worry. Poplar Fruit felt very guilty about Duan Xueqing's sudden disappearance. He even blamed himself for this matter. Wasn't it? This matter started because of him, and because of his carelessness, Duan Xueqing wasn't protected. If it wasn't Poplar Fruit's fault, who else could it be? Poplar Fruit stepped on the accelerator and kept the car at the highest speed. Other than refueling once in the middle of the road, he kept driving without stopping. In the middle of this, he kept making calls to Big Brother He, to Chen Anlan, and most importantly, to Pi NH1. Although Poplar Fruit threw away Pi NH1's note, Poplar Fruit remembered his phone number after glancing at it. Hello, Poplar Fruit. Pi NH1 was probably half asleep, but he immediately knew who was calling him, because only Poplar Fruit knew his new phone number. Where are you? Poplar Fruit asked anxiously. Xueqing is missing. Pi NH1 was stunned. He stood on the other end of the phone for a long time. When Poplar Fruit urged him, he actually started crying. Frowning, Yang Guo was a bit impatient. He believed that a man should have a bit of responsibility. What was the use of crying? At around 9 o'clock in the morning, Poplar Fruit finally arrived in Jiangnan. He didn't rush to the Duan family's house. Instead, he rushed to a food stall hidden in the city. Poplar Fruit walked in and saw Pi NH1 with red eyes. Ignoring the strange gazes of the people around him, Poplar Fruit went over and grabbed Pi NH1's collar. He lifted him up and said, "Hey, cheer up. Things haven't reached the worst yet." Pi NH1 was in a daze. He drooped his head as if he had nothing left to live for. Xueqing just went missing yesterday. Poplar Fruit looked around and pulled him to a quiet corner. He advised, "We still have a chance to save her. You don't understand. You don't know how perverted that Li guy is." Pi NH1 said weakly at first, but later on, he found strength from somewhere and pushed Poplar Fruit's hand away. He pointed at his crippled left leg and said with some grief and indignation, "My leg was broken by his order. If Xueqing fell into his hands, would she be better off than me?" From Pi NH1's trembling narration, Poplar Fruit finally understood the truth of his disappearance. It turned out that Pi NH1 didn't leave on his own. Although he always knew that he couldn't stay by Duan Xueqing's side and that as a spy, his departure was only a matter of time. However, because he couldn't bear to leave, after Pi NH1 returned to China, he stayed by Duan Xueqing's side for a week. Then, he was taken away by the rich second-generation friend behind him. "You were betrayed by your friend?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Pi NH1 smiled bitterly. He shook his head and said, "No, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have just lost a leg. That Li guy wanted to kill me at first, but my friend hid me by breaking my leg." The twists and turns in his story couldn't be described with words. At this moment, from Pi NH1's slightly aged face and thin body, Poplar Fruit could faintly tell that he had suffered a lot in the past. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't sympathize with him. He only silently said in his heart, "Serves you right." If Pi NH1 hadn't gotten involved, how could he have fallen into such a situation? "How did you get the news from before?" Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment before asking. Pi NH1 was silent for a moment before saying, "My friend told me." Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, "Then why didn't you ask your friend for help? He's so rich. Compared to me alone, wouldn't he be able to protect Xueqing better?" Pi NH1 said sadly, "He can't. That Li guy's background is too powerful. He can't afford to offend him. Not only that, in order not to implicate him, I already left his place and cut off contact with him." Pi NH1 said with a bitter smile. "Then does he know where Xueqing is?" Poplar Fruit felt that he had found a breakthrough. However, to his disappointment, PNH1 shook his head and said, "No, Lisa Chow didn't go through my friend. He sent someone over, but at that time, he hadn't taken action yet. My friend has only heard a little about it. In fact, Lisa Chow didn't trust anyone else. This time, he first sent a few of his bodyguards and hired thugs over. Once he caught the Duan Xueqing, he would come over from the capital. There was no other way. Lisa Chow couldn't run out in advance. Otherwise, his father would definitely be furious and capture him. Then, he would die before he could succeed." Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment. Then, he pulled PNH1's clothes and dragged him out. However, seeing Poplar Fruit's actions, the store's workers grabbed chairs and blocked the door. Their eyes were filled with hostility. Poplar Fruit snorted and gently moved his legs. Did they want to block Poplar Fruit's footsteps with such a small group of people? Perhaps, Poplar Fruit would kill his way out like in the movies. "Wait, wait." PNH1 hurriedly shouted, "Don't do it, Uncle Nyo. I'm fine. I'm going out with my friend. There's something I need to deal with." The stall's workers stopped. The fat man who came out of the kitchen with a machete looked at Poplar Fruit suspiciously, as if he suspected that Poplar Fruit had forced PNH1 to say that. Poplar Fruit didn't appreciate it. He sneered and said, "Who's your friend?" The fat man was even more suspicious. He was about to raise his machete. PNH1 smiled bitterly. He waved his hand at the fat man with the machete and said, "Uncle Nyo, it's really nothing." In the end, Poplar Fruit took PNH1 away safely. He let PNH1 sit in the front passenger seat and didn't restrict him. Poplar Fruit didn't believe that he could run away from him. Of course, PNH1 didn't plan to run away either. He was silent for a while, then asked, "Poplar Fruit, where are we going?" "The Duan family," Poplar Fruit answered after a while. He didn't even look at PNH1. PNH1 trembled, but he didn't say anything. He was afraid of the Duan family from the bottom of his heart. It was because he had wronged Duan Xueqing and didn't know how to face her family. Chapter 985. On the road, Poplar Fruit's cell phone suddenly rang. He took it out and looked at the screen. Suddenly, Poplar Fruit slammed on the brakes. Luckily, there were fewer cars on the road, and there were no cars following behind Poplar Fruit. Otherwise, there would have been a rear-end collision. "Xueqing is calling." Poplar Fruit opened his eyes wide and said in surprise. Although he found it hard to believe, Duan Xueqing's name was indeed displayed on the screen of his cell phone. Xiaoqing. PNH1 was shocked by the sudden braking, but when he heard Poplar Fruit's voice, he immediately turned his head. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to park the car on the side. He pulled the handbrake and quickly answered the call. "Xueqing, where did you go?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise, "Why is your phone switched off?" Poplar Fruit was still thinking that Duan Xueqing was in a bad mood and didn't know where to hide to think about life, and that she wasn't really caught. If it was really a false alarm, then Poplar Fruit's wasted trip would have been worth it. But on the other end of the phone, a sinister voice shattered Poplar Fruit's imagination. "Yo yo yo. Poplar Fruit, love saint, you still care about this chick." How could Poplar Fruit forget this voice? It was Lisa Chow, who looked serious, but was secretly up to no good. Yang's heart sank. His expression was like a storm that was about to blow. It was gloomy, brewing, and was about to erupt. PNH1 pricked up his ears, but he couldn't hear the voice on the phone. But from Poplar Fruit's expression, he could tell that it wasn't good news. "All the reports said that you were decent, that you were low-key, and that you were a loyal man," Lisa Chow said sarcastically. "Now it seems that they were all wrong, right? Love saint. How many women have you had? Zhang Yujie, Feng Beibei, and this Duan Xueqing? Ha ha, ha ha ha." Poplar Fruit took a deep breath, and his hands grabbed the steering wheel. He couldn't help but squeeze the steering wheel so hard that it made a screeching sound. He was afraid that if he took off the steering wheel cover, there would be fingerprints on the inside. Poplar Fruit was trying his best to restrain himself from tearing the Land Rover apart. "Li," Poplar Fruit said, gritted his teeth. "What do you want?" "Yo. Do you still remember me?" At this moment, Lisa Chow was in a very good mood, as if there was no longer a haze of having to flee abroad. It seems that I still have some weight to you, ha ha. Lisa Chow. If you have the ability, come at me. What kind of man are you to bully a girl? Poplar Fruit roared. His voice echoed in the car, and Pi NH1's ears were buzzing. Hey, you're in a hurry. Aren't you always acting like some bullshit master, and don't take others seriously? Lisa Chow was in a good mood, as if he had been constipated for more than a year. Come, let me show you a video. Lisa Chow suddenly hung up the phone, and then a video was sent to him. Poplar Fruit frowned and clicked on the video. Pi NH1 also came over to watch. Poplar Fruit looked at him with a dark face, but he didn't stop him. The video wasn't long, but Poplar Fruit could see that Duan Xueqing was tied to a chair in a spacious warehouse. The camera quickly turned, and Poplar Fruit saw a few tall men in black. Then, Lisa Chow's face appeared. Xiao Qing. When Pi NH1 saw Duan Xueqing, he couldn't help but shout. His face was full of pain, as if he felt the same pain as Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit picked up the phone and dialed back. Lisa Chow's voice came through. See? Hey. You little cold girl, you've fallen into my hands. Poplar Fruit took a deep breath, but he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. His voice couldn't calm down as he asked, "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Lisa Chow laughed again. "That depends on how you feel." Poplar Fruit knitted his brows and clenched his fists. "Let her go, and I'll be at your mercy." Yo. A hero saving a damsel in distress, sacrificing himself for others. I'm so touched. Lisa Chow said eccentrically. TSK. Lisa Chow shouted for a while before he said proudly, "Sure, come over to Jiangnan, and I'll let you exchange one person for one person." "Okay." Poplar Fruit agreed. "Tell me, where are you right now?" "I'll immediately come over from Yangcheng City." "Hehe, do you think I'm stupid?" Lisa Chow harumphed. "I'll tell you the location, and you'll look for that bitch Zheng Yujie to save her." "I'll do it alone." Poplar Fruit clenched his teeth and said, "That's the right attitude." Lisa Chow nodded his head in satisfaction and said, "But, it doesn't matter, you can find anyone." Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. "But," Lisa Chow chuckled as he continued, "you know how powerful my family is. If I get any news that you've called the police or that Zheng Yujie has sent someone to warn me, I'll be dead. I can clearly tell you that this little cold girl, you can forget about bringing her back in a clean and complete state." Ha ha. Poplar Fruit was silent as he endured the anger that was about to erupt. He clenched his teeth and said word by word, "I want to hear her speak. TSK. You don't believe me, right?" Lisa Chow sneered and said, "Okay, you listen to her." No one knew what was going on over there. Perhaps it was the cloth that was covering Duan Xueqing's mouth. But there were a few sounds of resistance and screams. Lisa Chow chuckled. "You want to commit suicide by biting your tongue? No way. Let me die." Duan Xueqing's voice was very muffled. She was extremely tired, but still cold and emotionless. Poplar Fruit pictured Duan Xueqing being held by Lisa Chow in his mind. Not only him, but Pi NH1's eyes were bloodshot, and he wanted to pounce and scream. Poplar Fruit covered Pi NH1's mouth and pushed him back. "You're such a boring woman. I haven't fucked you yet." Lisa Chow scolded as he stuffed Duan Xueqing's mouth with the cloth again. "Have you finished listening? If you have, hurry up and come to Jiangnan." Lisa Chow chuckled and said, "When you come, I will naturally give you the address." Poplar Fruit took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, "Okay, as long as you don't touch her, I promise you that you can do whatever you want with me. You're a real man." Lisa Chow praised him hypocritically and said proudly, "Don't worry, before you come, I won't touch a single hair of hers. But, I will only give you half a day. If I don't see you by 12 o'clock tonight, you will never see this cold girl again." Lisa Chow hung up the phone after he finished speaking, leaving only the cold beeping sound. Chapter 986. Why did you lie? After Poplar Fruit hung up the phone, the previously submissive Pi NH1 actually flew into a rage at Poplar Fruit. "Aren't you already here? Why did you tell him you were still in Yangcheng? Why didn't you immediately go and save Xiaoqing? In his anger, Pi NH1 actually wanted to snatch the phone from Poplar Fruit's hands. Was he trying to rebel against him? Yang Guo was annoyed. First, he pushed Bai Tingyuan back. Then, he stretched out his arms and pulled Bai Tingyuan over by his collar. Then, he ruthlessly slapped Bai Tingyuan twice to wake him up. You need to be clear about who's the boss right now and who's giving orders. Poplar Fruit frowned and pointed at Pi NH1. But, have you ever thought that if you're a second late, Xiaoqing will suffer for a second longer? Pi NH1 was actually very stubborn as he raised his head and said unyieldingly. At this moment, Poplar Fruit was the first to soften. He patted Pi NH1's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, she's still fine." Originally, Poplar Fruit didn't need to be long-winded with Pi NH1, nor did he need to explain his thoughts to him. However, when he saw Pi NH1's face with a palm print and the same stubbornness as Du and Xueqing, he still patiently analyzed the situation. This Li Zichao kidnapped Xueqing mainly to deal with me. In order to give me the greatest humiliation, he definitely won't do anything to Xueqing before I arrive. Poplar Fruit analyzed. Only in front of me, will he feel relieved. He won't waste so much effort and just walk away. We can't go over directly, or else we'll really fall into his trap. Also, if I tell him that I'm already in Jiangnan, wouldn't that alert him and let him know that I already knew about his plan? Wouldn't that anger him and make him do something even crazier? Poplar Fruit said. Our top priority is to find the location where this video was taken, find Li Zichao's whereabouts, and then rescue Xueqing. Poplar Fruit said. There's still time, let's move. At this moment, Poplar Fruit's EQ and IQ were off the charts. His analysis of Li Zichao wasn't wrong at all. Li Zichao want to humiliate Poplar Fruit in front of Poplar Fruit. In order to succeed, not only did he sneak out of Beijing, he even meticulously set up a huge scene to wait for Poplar Fruit. As for Du and Xueqing, although he was tempted, he still felt that it wasn't worth it. It wasn't like he hadn't seen beauties before. Then what should we do? Pi NH1 asked. You're asking me what to do? Poplar Fruit asked angrily. Aren't you a local? Hurry up and help me identify which warehouse this video was taken from. I can't recognize it. All warehouses look like this. Pi NH1 took Poplar Fruit's phone and seriously watched the video a few times. He shook his head and said dejectedly. Poplar Fruit frowned and took the phone. He looked at it for a long time and realized that he really couldn't find any clues. He could only see Li Zichao and at least 4 men in black surrounding him. Their bodies were bulging, and he didn't know if they had any weapons. Why don't we ask the Duan family for help? Pi NH1 asked expectantly. Aren't we going to the Duan family? If we ask the Duan family for help, her family is very powerful here. Send people out and do a carpet search. We'll definitely be able to find them if we search every warehouse. Are you stupid? Poplar Fruit looked at him speechlessly and said, let's not talk about a carpet search. Even if they make a few calls and Li Zichao finds out, will Xueqing still be alive? Poplar Fruit's mind became clearer and clearer. He said, right now, we can't go to the Duan family, and we can't let the Duan family know about this situation, because the Duan family has already called the police. As long as the police are involved, we won't be able to protect Xueqing's safety. You also said that Li Zichao has a strong background in Jiangnan. Pi NH1 quickly nodded. For this matter, we can only rely on ourselves. Poplar Fruit restarted the car and said seriously, let's go back to your food stall and think of a countermeasure. Your friend should be reliable, right? Uncle Nyo was my father's good friend when he was alive. Pi NH1 nodded and said. In fact, Poplar Fruit didn't need to do it alone. At noon, reinforcements had already arrived. Big Brother Yang, Big Brother Meng. Poplar Fruit was pleasantly surprised to see He Wenjue and a few people appear in front of him like divine soldiers descending from the sky. Poplar Fruit, I can't let you take the risk alone. He Wenjue smiled and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. He said, so, after receiving your call, I rushed over. In fact, He Wenjue wasn't worried about Poplar Fruit's strength. He was worried that Poplar Fruit would be too reckless and hurt himself or others. Poplar Fruit's kung fu was so powerful that he could beat a Muay Thai expert to death in a few seconds with his bare hands. That was more than a year ago. Poplar Fruit's current strength was much stronger, so Hwangja was worried that Poplar Fruit would make a ruckus out of desperation, so he quickly brought 2 people to help. After all, they were professionals in saving lives. As long as no one died, Hwangja was confident that he could help Poplar Fruit deal with the aftermath. Hwangja said, "This is Hwang Yongning, the captain of the SWAT team in the Jiangnan military region. He is also my former comrade. I trust him, so I asked him to help today." Poplar Fruit frowned and pulled Hwangja to the side. He explained the situation to him and said, "Big brother, our situation is like this. It's not good to make a big fuss. If Lisa Chow finds out, my junior sister will be dead. Don't worry." Hwangja smiled and said, "I've already thought about it. The Li family is very powerful in Jiangnan, so I can only find people I trust to help. Old Huang and I have been through life and death together, so he won't leak the secret. Moreover, there are only a few people in action today. The 2 people old Huang brought are also our own people. Big brother Huang, I'm sorry. I was worried, so I misunderstood you just now." Poplar Fruit said, a little embarrassed. Hwang Yongning was not wearing his uniform now, probably because he was worried that the secret would be leaked. He smiled and said, "It's okay. This is a serious matter, so we have to be careful. What's the situation now? Can you tell me about it?" They found a room in the food stall. Poplar Fruit and the others sat around. Pi NH1 couldn't sit, so he could only stand aside. Poplar Fruit took out a video and sent it to the computer provided by Uncle Nyo. He told them about the current progress. Hwang Yongning and Hwangja both took the computer and watched the video several times. In the end, they both shook their heads and said, "The video is too short. We can't see anything." Poplar Fruit was a little disappointed, but fortunately, this was also expected. "It seems that you have to call him and lure him to tell us the specific location." Hwang Yongning thought for a while and said. Chapter 987. After the discussion, Poplar Fruit followed Hwang Yongning's instructions and called Duan Xueqing. "I'm now in Jiangnan. Where are you? Tell me, I want to go there." Poplar Fruit said in a deep voice. "You're quite fast. It seems that our great Casanova is very worried about your little lover." Lisa Chow's sarcastic voice made Poplar Fruit frown. He glanced at Pi NH1. Pi NH1 could hear Lisa Chow's words. Pi NH1's expression was very interesting. He was jealous, but he didn't dare to be jealous. He didn't know how to express his grievances, so he could only lower his head and suffer alone. "Hey, you're not talking. Are you angry? Hey, don't be like this." Lisa Chow pretended to persuade her. "You little cold girl, I didn't even move a finger when you were with me. If it wasn't for her seeking death, I was planning to treat you well." "Address," Poplar Fruit said coldly. "Lisa Chow, you want me, right? If you have the guts, let's fight one-on-one later. What kind of man are you to bully a girl?" After talking to Lisa Chow for a while, Poplar Fruit finally got the address and hung up the phone. A SWAT member had already found the location on the map. He said, "It's in the south of the city, about 16 kilometers away from here. We can get there in less than half an hour." Hwang Yongning took the computer and pointed at the enlarged satellite image. After looking at it for a while, he said, "This is a warehouse area, but there is only one road to enter. If I'm not wrong, they must have installed cameras or sent people to watch the entrance of this road. Except for Yang, we can't drive in directly. Our advantage is that they still have a wrong judgment about Yang, so we can get out of the car here. Except for Yang, we can all climb in from the outside and surround this warehouse from 4 directions." Hwang Yongning raised 2 fingers and pointed at the warehouse Lisa Chow mentioned on the map. From the previous video, there are a lot of thugs inside. Even if they are not retired soldiers, they are still dangerous people. Hwangja patted Hwang Yongning's shoulder and said, "So, I suggest that everyone be mentally prepared for a tough battle. Xiao Li, you can hide in the trunk of Xiao Yang's car and go in with him." Hwang Yongning suddenly had an idea. He looked at a strong young man next to him and said, "Yang, Wait for an opportunity to go in and protect Yang. Yes. Xiao Li cracked his knuckles, put his legs together, and answered seriously. Haha. He Wenjue and Meng Sanhua couldn't help but laugh after hearing this. What's wrong? Huang Yongning and He Wenjue were comrades who had gone through life and death situations together. He knew that Wenjue was not laughing at him on purpose. You still want to protect Poplar Fruit? It's good enough that he doesn't protect us. He Wenjue shook his head and laughed. Is Yang very strong? Was he in the army? Huang Yongning looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise and asked. He felt that Poplar Fruit did not look like he was in the army. Because he was in the army, he naturally had a strong sense of discipline. No. Poplar Fruit shook his head and laughed. He was not in the mood to laugh. He was worried. He is not in the army, but in this room, pick any one of us and no one can beat him, He Wenjue said with a smile. Meng Sanhua added, maybe even the 6 of us together can't beat him. He's that strong. Huang Yongning was really surprised because he knew Meng Sanhua. He was this year's kickboxing champion. He was said to be good at kung fu. He was proud of his skills and would not admit defeat to anyone. Now, Meng Sanhua clearly said that he could not beat Poplar Fruit. This showed how strong Poplar Fruit was. He Wenjue thought for a while and said, Li can follow Poplar Fruit in the car. But your mission is to guard the exit. Otherwise, if they escape or something happens, you will be responsible for a surprise attack when they take the hostages away. Of course, you have to be careful not to be discovered. Xiao Li nodded. The plan was complete. There was no time to lose. They had to leave now. Poplar Fruit looked at Pi Nh1 and said, do you want to stay here? Pi Nh1 was useless as a cripple. Compared to 2 days ago, Poplar Fruit's tone towards Pi Nh1 was much better. Pi Nh1 had not rested well since yesterday. He was a little tired, but he still shook his head firmly and said, I want to go. Poplar Fruit understood Pi Nh1's thoughts. Didn't he want to see Du and Xueqing be rescued as soon as possible? Poplar Fruit could not help but mock him again. I advise you not to have too much hope. Xueqing will not forgive you. Who told you to lie to her? To take advantage of her feelings? Pi Nh1 was sad. After a moment of silence, he said, I just want to see her safe and sound. Seeing him like this, Poplar Fruit could not bear to continue talking. He turned his head and got into the car. When they arrived at the rendezvous point, Huang Yongning did the final analysis of the mission and the general mobilization. He Wenjue took a bulletproof vest from his car and put it on Poplar Fruit. Not only that, Yang Zhengdong took out a black pistol from his holster and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit nodded gratefully. He skillfully put it on his back and was about to pull his shirt to cover it. Oh. Wait a minute. Huang Yongning pulled Poplar Fruit in surprise. He looked at He Wenjue and asked, why did you give him a gun? Do you know if the people inside have weapons? He Wenjue asked. With a gun in hand, he can deal with some extremely bad situations. Don't worry, Poplar Fruit is good at shooting. Huang Yongning shook his head and said, No. You can bring guns, but Yang can't. He shot at the wrong place. How can he kill someone? He can't be included in the fighting sequence. With our protection, he will be fine. Also, I want to give you a reminder, Huang Yongning said seriously. Today's operation must be done cleanly. If the situation is critical, you can shoot, but you can't kill anyone. Also, Lisa Chow, we can't hurt him. Why? Poplar Fruit and Pi Nh1 asked at the same time. Lisa Chow was the mastermind, causing Du and Xueqing to suffer so much. Poplar Fruit even wanted to go in and shoot him. Why? Huang Yongning smiled bitterly. Because he is Lisa Chow. Although the Li family doesn't have much power here, his grandfather has a student who is our senior official. He is very protective. Huang Yongning sighed and said, if we were just saving people, we would be in the right, and nothing would happen. But if we hurt Li Zichao, or something happens to him, all of us will have to bear the consequences. Not only can we not hurt him, but in the end, we can't catch him either. Huang Yongning looked at Poplar Fruit and said solemnly. Chapter 988. Poplar Fruit and Pi Nh1 both fell silent after hearing Huang Yongning's words. Huang Yongning smiled bitterly. He knew this would happen. Give me the gun. Huang Yongning asked Poplar Fruit for the gun and handed it back to Yang Zhengdong. It wasn't that he didn't believe he Wenjue. He even believed in Poplar Fruit's shooting skills. However, he was worried that Poplar Fruit wouldn't be able to control himself. It would be troublesome if something unexpected happened. He didn't want to spoil everyone's mood by saying this, but he had no choice. A gun was too difficult to control. If he didn't say it, what if Poplar Fruit accidentally fired and killed Li Zichao? Forget it. Let's save him first. He Wenjue patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and comforted him. We'll discuss how to deal with Li Zichao later. Poplar Fruit sighed helplessly and nodded. Meng Sanhua wanted to give Poplar Fruit a military dagger, but Poplar Fruit declined. Since they couldn't kill Li Zichao, what was the point of bringing so many weapons? Moreover, he wasn't used to using a dagger. He might as well fight with his bare hand. Poplar Fruit was about to get into the car when Xiao Li pointed at Pi Nh1, who was standing at the side with his head lowered, and asked, "What about him?" Everyone looked at Pi Nh1. They could tell that he wasn't an expert. He would only be a hindrance if he followed them. Pi Nh1 seemed to realize that he was a burden. He looked at everyone and said in a low voice, "I won't go in. I'll watch the car from outside." Huang Yongning nodded and said, "That's good. Later, listen to our orders. If it's done, you can drive the car over." He threw the key to Pi Nh1. Because it was a secret mission, Huang Yongning didn't drive a special police car. That would be too conspicuous. Instead, he drove a Mazda that was almost 10 years old. It looked old. "Can you drive it?" Poplar Fruit asked doubtfully. Pi Nh1's left leg wasn't flexible. Pi Nh1 nodded honestly and said, "I can step on the accelerator and brake, I can." Needless to say, everyone got into position. Other than Xiao Li, who was hiding in Poplar Fruit's trunk, the others climbed into the warehouse from all corners. "Everyone, number 1 is in position." Huang Yongning's voice came from the headset. "Number 2 is in position." Someone else immediately followed. Meng Sanhua's voice came along with the noisy breathing. "Number 3 is in position." "Motherfucker, I just knocked out a sentry. You guys be careful." As expected, Li Zichao's men were quite capable. However, they were the best soldiers and special police in their respective areas. Soon, they took care of the 2 outposts neatly and quickly got into position. "There are about 10 people in there. Number 2, I see 2 on your side, 1 on your left and 1 on your right. Be careful when you break through." He Wenjue hid on the roof and peeked in. "Xiao Yang, it's your turn. You have to distract them so that we can save them," Huang Yongning commanded in a low voice. "Okay." Poplar Fruit started the Land Rover and drove out of the bushes where they were hiding. After turning at a crossroad, they finally faced the area where the warehouse was. He drove along the road and dialed Duan Shueqing's phone. "I'm almost there. I'm going to the warehouse now." "Where are you?" Poplar Fruit pretended not to know them to lower their guard. TSK, you're so fast. It's not even dark yet. Seems like the power of love is great." Li Zichao's disgusting voice came again. Poplar Fruit could only endure it silently. He gritted his teeth and listened to his nonsense for a while before continuing to drive towards the warehouse. As he drove, Poplar Fruit took off his bulletproof vest and threw it in the back seat. While waiting, Poplar Fruit thought it through. Instead of exposing himself, people might think that it was a bulletproof vest, and putting Duan Shueqing in danger, it was better to let go of all his restraints and walk in barehanded. "I'm going in," Poplar Fruit said as he took off his headset and hid it in the car. When he got out of the car, a burly man wearing sunglasses came out from the side and walked towards Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit held back his anger and let the man pat him. Then, he grabbed his collar and pushed him inside. "I can walk by myself." Poplar Fruit deliberately struggled, but he didn't use any strength to show weakness. The man in sunglasses sniffed disdainfully and continued to push Poplar Fruit, as if he didn't hear what Poplar Fruit said. The main door of the warehouse was locked, but there was a small door on the side that could be entered. After entering the small door, it suddenly opened up. The front was brightly lit, and it was a sharp contrast to the gradually reddening evening sky outside. As soon as he entered, Poplar Fruit's breathing quickened because he saw Duan Shueching tied to a chair on a high platform in the middle of the warehouse. Duan Shueching's clothes were still intact. Seeing this, Poplar Fruit's heart finally calmed down a little. However, she was tied too tightly, and Poplar Fruit was a little worried that she would be hurt. After 1 day and 1 night, Duan Shueching not only looked haggard, but her face was also a little swollen. He didn't know if it was because of Li Zichao's slaps. Her mouth was stuffed with a large piece of cloth. Seeing her indifferent eyes that didn't have any reluctance towards life and death, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but feel his heart tighten. "Shueching, silly girl, hang in there," Poplar Fruit silently said to Duan Shueching in his heart. "That bad guy is still outside. After I save you, I'll let you slap him. Slap him as many times as you want." Clap, clap, clap. A burst of applause brought Poplar Fruit back to reality. He saw Li Zichao clapping his hands and appearing at the front of the high platform. His feminine face didn't change, but it was paler than before. "You're finally here." Li Zichao smiled proudly. Although Poplar Fruit could quickly get rid of the Duan Shueching and reach Duan Shueching's side before Li Zichao did, Poplar Fruit couldn't make a move. This was because he noticed that behind Duan Shueching stood a man in a singlet with a knife. He was muscular and didn't look like a simple character. Under the circumstances where he couldn't save Duan Shueching unscathed, Poplar Fruit could only endure and wait for the best opportunity. "I'm here." As if in response to Li Zichao's words, Poplar Fruit's face darkened as he said, "I've kept my promise." "Let her go." "Let who go?" Li Zichao pretended to be crazy and asked. A hint of anger flashed across Poplar Fruit's face, and Li Zichao saw it clearly. He said, "I've already delivered myself to your door. You should let her go. If you have any grudges, you should come at me." Chapter 989. While he was negotiating with Li Zichao, Poplar Fruit kept looking around with the corner of his eyes. He found that although the warehouse was a bit shabby, it should have been a very useful national warehouse in the past. There were several layers of iron shelves around it, and several bright lights lit up the warehouse like it was daytime. She didn't know where Li Zichao found so many thugs. There were more than 10 people on the first floor, and there were more on the second and third floors. Every one of them was either tattooed or had a ferocious look on their faces. They were all staring at young Guo with unkind eyes. Poplar Fruit felt that the biggest threat wasn't these thugs, but the 2 men in black standing not far from Li Zichao. They were wearing suits and sunglasses. These 2 were probably the bodyguards that Li Zichao brought. Young Guo could feel the iron-blooded aura of Hidage and the others from their bodies. Moreover, under the suits that didn't reveal their talents, there was definitely a beast-like body and fighting spirit. In order to save Duan Shueching, Poplar Fruit could only pretend to be weak. Although he was stubbornly arguing with Li Zichao, his body seemed weak and powerless. He was pushed and shoved by the sunglasses man behind him, and he didn't have any strength to fight back. But when would Big Brother he make a move? Without a headset, Poplar Fruit couldn't receive orders from the outside, so he could only swallow his anger and wait. "Do you know what I hate the most about you?" Li Zichao suddenly jumped down from the high platform, and one of the men in black subconsciously moved and followed behind him. Poplar Fruit didn't move. At this moment, his acting skills were on full display. He looked at Li Zichao with disdain and hatred, but he didn't say anything. It didn't matter. Li Zichao originally wanted to talk to himself. His 2 arms waved back and forth as if he was doing stretching exercises, and he said, No, I don't hate you for stealing my fiancé." Li Zichao shamelessly treated Zheng Yujie as his fiancé, and the fake expression on his face made people want to vomit. However, Poplar Fruit chose to ignore it. "It's your always calm expression." At this moment, Li Zichao suddenly became a little ferocious and a little crazy, as if he had become a schizophrenic. "Why? Why do you always act like you don't care? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment for stealing my woman? I spent so much effort to create a scandal about you, and you don't care at all?" In fact, Poplar Fruit really didn't listen to his roar very seriously. He was just thinking about whether he should make a move when Lisa Chow approached. It seemed impossible, because the man with the knife was standing behind Duan Xueqing. Even if Poplar Fruit made a move, he didn't have the confidence to save Duan Xueqing. They had the Duan Xueqing in their hands, so Poplar Fruit certainly couldn't do anything to Lisa Chow. However, at this moment, a strong force suddenly came from behind. The man in the sunglasses suddenly rushed forward, twisted Poplar Fruit's arm, and held Poplar Fruit up. Of course, Poplar Fruit went easy on him. How could the man in the sunglasses lock Poplar Fruit with his clumsy movements? If Poplar Fruit wanted to hit someone, the moment the man in the sunglasses pounced on him, Poplar Fruit could bounce his leg back and kick him to the ground. Ah! Poplar Fruit was very cooperative and raised his head to scream, as if he was in pain from the man in the sunglasses twisting his arm. That's right. You know pain. Lisa Chow proudly shouted, if you don't feel pain, what's the point of me hitting you? Just as he finished speaking, Lisa Chow suddenly took 2 steps forward and gave a standard uppercut to Poplar Fruit's abdomen. At that moment, Poplar Fruit had 2 choices. One was to tighten the muscles in his abdomen. With Lisa Chow's weak strength, it was basically impossible for him to hurt Poplar Fruit. Moreover, there was a possibility that he would be hurt by the rebound of Poplar Fruit's abdominal muscles. Just imagine the feeling of punching a wall. However, Poplar Fruit still chose the second choice. He relaxed his defense and took Lisa Chow's punch. To be honest, it was painful, but not that painful. However, Poplar Fruit still pretended to howl, his face distorted, and when the man in the sunglasses let go, he fell to the ground, holding his stomach and retching. Lisa Chow felt a sense of accomplishment at this moment. Looking at Poplar Fruit being beaten like this by him, he proudly kicked Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said, Hey, aren't you good at pretending? How come it hurts? Oh. Duan Xueqing, who had been motionless, finally began to struggle a little. She kept twisting and turning, looking sadly at Poplar Fruit being beaten. She wanted to shout, but the rag stuffed her mouth full. It's not time yet. Poplar Fruit continued to pretend. He anxiously waited, but he didn't know when Big Brother he and the others would make their move. Let her go, and you can do whatever you want to me, Poplar Fruit said in a hoarse voice with difficulty. Lisa Chow was very satisfied with Poplar Fruit's performance. He spread out his hands and smiled. I don't want to do anything to you. I just want to beat you up. What good will it do me? I just want to return the pain you gave me back to you 10 times, 100 times. Lisa Chow suddenly became a little ferocious. Lift him up. Lisa Chow ordered. The man in shades walked up and lifted Poplar Fruit up from the ground. Poplar Fruit was limp as he was lifted up by the man in shades, facing the stage. Lisa Chow walked up and looked at him. He frowned and said, What are you waiting for? Get him up here too. How can he see from below? And so, Poplar Fruit was dragged up the stage like a drunkard. At this moment, he was very close to Duan Xueqing, only a few meters away. He could clearly see Duan Xueqing's cold and painful eyes. Lisa Chow felt that he had Poplar Fruit under control. There were so many of his men in the warehouse, and Poplar Fruit was so weak that he was full of confidence. Even if he brought Poplar Fruit up the stage, it would not be a pity. You probably don't know what it means to kill your father and take your wife, right? You will never understand the pain of taking Zheng Yujie away from me. Lisa Chow shouted at Poplar Fruit ferociously. It doesn't matter, I will let you know today. I will let you see today. Finally, it was time for the main event. Lisa Chow's face was as excited as a lunatic. I will let you see, your woman, I will let you see with your own eyes how I fuck her, and fuck her fiercely in front of you. The pain you gave me in the past, today I will return it to you tenfold, 100-fold. Lisa Chow was so excited that he was incoherent. Poplar Fruit knew and guessed Lisa Chow's intention, but he still shouted, no. Poplar Fruit struggled to kneel down. With a painful face, he begged, let her go. I have wronged you. You can do whatever you want to me. Poplar Fruit was faking it, but he still revealed his true feelings. Duan Xueqing looked at Poplar Fruit, and finally, there were emotional fluctuations in her eyes. She shed tears and looked sadly at Poplar Fruit, as if saying, don't be like this, it's not worth it. Chapter 990. Would Li Zichao give up on Duan Xueqing just because Poplar Fruit begged for mercy? That's impossible. At this moment, his mind was filled with thoughts of standing in front of Poplar Fruit and ruthlessly fuck his woman, so that he would forever remember the shame he gave her. Yes, Li Zichao didn't want Poplar Fruit to die. He wanted to make Poplar Fruit suffer a fate worse than death before leaving the country. Hold him. Make sure he opens his eyes and looks at me. Such a good show, I spent so much effort to act it out for you. If you don't watch, wouldn't it be a waste? Li Zichao smiled, licked his lips and walked towards Duan Xueqing. At this time, Duan Xueqing struggled in fear, but the more she struggled, the more Li Zichao felt satisfied. Let him go. Poplar Fruit was held by the sunglasses man from the back, and Li Zichao's bodyguard was in front. The man in black pinched his chin and fixed his gaze. Poplar Fruit also struggled, but he was punched in the stomach by the man in black. This time, he finally felt some pain, but the pain only made Poplar Fruit's mind clearer. Little cold girl, it's useless to struggle. If it were me, I'd rather enjoy it obediently. This is my advice to you. Li Zichao smiled sinisterly, he moved his crotch forward, and his posture was unsightly. Give me the knife. Li Zichao took the knife from the man in a singlet behind him and held it upside down. He looked at Duan Xueqing and said, tied up like this, it's too unromantic. You have to loosen 2 ropes, it'll be interesting if you struggle a little. Under the guidance of the man in a singlet, he cut off 3 ropes. Although he didn't untie her 4 limbs, the tied-up Duan Xueqing was able to twist her body and struggle. Tears of pain streamed down her face as she tried to throw herself at the knife. Don't. Poplar Fruit struggled to squeeze out 2 words from the man in black's hand. He still wanted to wait for a good opportunity, but Duan Xueqing couldn't risk her life like this. Li Zichao pulled the knife back and laughed proudly like he was teasing a monkey. Little cold girl, Big Brother hasn't enjoyed you yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Or do you want to eat Big Brother's stick? In the blink of an eye, Duan Xueqing, who had not eaten for a day and a night and was on the verge of death, struggled violently. Unexpectedly, she managed to move the more than 10 jin armchair, tripped, and threw herself at Li Zichao. Li Zichao was caught off guard and was thrown to the ground by Duan Xueqing. To be exact, he wasn't thrown to the ground by Duan Xueqing because Li Zichao subconsciously jumped back. However, his legs were in a mess and he tripped over himself, falling heavily to the ground. Not only did he fall on his butt, but he also sent the knife flying a few meters away. Almost subconsciously, the man in a singlet reached out to support Li Zichao. As for Poplar Fruit, he was very worried about Duan Xueqing because she was kneeling on the ground and there was a more than 10 jin armchair behind her. He didn't know if she was injured, but now wasn't the time to worry, because this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take action. Not only was Poplar Fruit close, but the knife, which was the biggest threat to Duan Xueqing, had already been sent flying, and the fierce man in a singlet was only focused on supporting Li Zichao. Usually, when the main character in a movie started to lose control, he would shout loudly. However, Poplar Fruit didn't. He was almost silent as he suddenly exerted strength in his arms. A man in sunglasses could hold Poplar Fruit. What a joke! Poplar Fruit exerted strength and the man in sunglasses' hands drooped down. It was unknown whether they were broken or twisted. However, before he could shout, Poplar Fruit's right arm swept out like a tiger's tail and heavily hit the man in black's chest who was choking his mouth. It could be said that Poplar Fruit didn't use any kung fu moves at all. He simply crushed them with speed and strength. Poplar Fruit didn't have any intention of restraining his strength. Just like that, his arm hit the man in black's chest, almost crushing his chest. But even so, Yang Guo's terrifying strength still broke a few of the black-clothed man's ribs. His entire body flew backwards, and without a sound, he fainted. And this wasn't the end. Poplar Fruit suddenly raised his head and hit the man in sunglasses' face with the back of his head. This time, the man in sunglasses shattered and his nose collapsed. His whole body fell off the stage and stopped breathing. He probably didn't kill anyone, but Poplar Fruit's 3 strikes were really mixed with the anger of Duan Xueqing being humiliated. He didn't show any mercy at all. It was a long story, but in fact, These two people were knocked down by Poplar Fruit in a flash. No one could react at all. When they reacted, Poplar Fruit had already rushed to Duan Xueqing's side. He pulled the chair and helped Duan Xueqing up. "Catch him for me." However, Poplar Fruit didn't care about Duan Xueqing's injuries. This was because under Li Zichao's command, the man in the singlet roared and waved his thick arm to hit Poplar Fruit. For this type of enemy, Poplar Fruit was the least worried. This was because he was just big and had a little brute force. But whose brute force could be compared to Poplar Fruit's? Poplar Fruit's right arm caught the bulky man in the singlet's arms. He also let out a roar and punched with his right fist 3 times. The speed was so fast that there were after-images. Poplar Fruit used the Xingyi crushing fist. Although he held back a little, the crushing fist style was as fierce as a landslide. His punches hit the man's chest, but the force passed through his abdomen and back. The man in the singlet clutched his chest and knelt on the ground. He had already suffered internal injuries. Even if he was cured in the future, he would probably be sickly and wouldn't be able to bully people anymore. Poplar Fruit kicked him away so that he wouldn't block his line of sight. "I'm going to kill you." Li Zichao's annoying voice suddenly sounded. Poplar Fruit was about to greet Duan Xueqing, but he couldn't help but turn his head to look. Li Zichao had picked up the knife at an unknown time. His confidence was greatly boosted. His face was ferocious as he slashed at Poplar Fruit. At this time, he didn't care whether he was happy or not. His anger rose. He would kill Poplar Fruit and get his revenge. Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid. His pupils shrank slightly as he focused on Li Zichao's movements. He took a step forward and his left hand suddenly grabbed Li Zichao's wrist that was holding the knife. Then, he pinched it like a vice and twisted it forcefully. "Ah!" Li Zichao screamed. His right hand was in great pain as if his joints had cracked. He couldn't hold the knife and it fell to the ground. Poplar Fruit's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He caught the knife with his right hand. Normally, Poplar Fruit's most comfortable move should be to use the 6 style of Miaodao. He would flip his hand and directly slit Li Zichao's neck. This was also the best way to vent his anger. However, just as Poplar Fruit's right hand was about to lift, he stopped. He remembered Huang Yongning's advice. Now wasn't the time to kill him. A gentleman's revenge was a dish best served cold. Poplar Fruit snorted and retracted his hand. He kicked out and sent Li Zichao flying far away. Chapter 991. After kicking Li Zichao away, Poplar Fruit grabbed the katana and twirled it around. Although the katana was light and not as smooth as the Miaodao, it was still a lethal weapon. It was much more intimidating to others. Finally, Li Zichao's thugs reacted. First, another bodyguard in black quickly jumped onto the high platform. While guarding against Poplar Fruit, he helped Li Zichao up. The other 10 or so thugs also surrounded the high platform. Yang Guo swung her sword diagonally behind her, cutting off the ropes binding Duan Xueqing's body. She pulled the ropes away from her body while shielding Duan Xueqing behind her. Bang! Bang! There were several loud sounds of glass breaking. Several figures came into the warehouse. It was Big Brother He and Huang Yongning who had been lying in ambush for a long time. They had been waiting for an opportunity and didn't dare to attack rashly. After all, there were only 5 of them. It wasn't easy at all to save someone from so many people. Not to mention saving someone, the 10 or so thugs upstairs were the first thing they had to deal with. But Poplar Fruit had already started fighting. If they didn't act now, they would completely lose their chance. The thugs upstairs surrounded them. The sound of fighting was suddenly heard. It was as if they had suddenly fallen into a state of chaos. But on the first floor, there was still a confrontation on the high platform. Poplar Fruit waved the katana and used flashy moves to scare them. He majestically stood in front of Duan Xueqing, crossed his arms, and shouted, "Come on, come on." At this time, Li Zichao was helped up. He staggered and stood up straight. Then, Li Zichao pushed away the bodyguard in black. He angrily grabbed his clothes and shouted, "Hit him." He also shouted at the thugs below the stage, "Kill him. If he dies, it's on me," Li Zichao ordered. Immediately, more than a dozen thugs quickly took out water pipes and machetes from the place where they hid the machetes. They were about to climb up the platform aggressively. Poplar Fruit had to face the siege of the thugs. But before that, he had to deal with Li Zechao's bodyguard in black. The latter took out a baton from his waist and swung it. A black steel baton popped out. He calmly walked towards Poplar Fruit. Although he was wearing a suit, his powerful body exuded a powerful aura. A master. He was a master who could even compete with Meng Sanhua. The reason why Yang Guo was able to deal with the black-clothed man so easily was because he took advantage of the element of surprise. The others thought that he was as vulnerable as an ordinary person and were unprepared. Then, they were whipped by his arm until their ribs were broken and they fainted directly. However, Poplar Fruit was not afraid of him. After all, even Meng Sanhua was no match for him. At most, it would take some effort. There were too many thugs below the stage. Poplar Fruit could not drag them up the stage. Otherwise, even if he could protect himself, he would not be able to protect Duan Xueqing. He had to deal with the man in black first. The baton was made of steel. It was even better than the steel of the knife. When Poplar Fruit swung his knife at him, he felt a small crack on the blade. If he swung it a few more times, the entire knife might break. He did not know that his opponent was also very surprised. He did not expect Poplar Fruit to be so strong that he almost lost his grip on the baton. He must have been a master in the army. Poplar Fruit observed his opponent carefully. The man in black looked to be in his 30s. His physical condition was still in peak condition. He still had the strong aura of a soldier. He must have just retired a few years ago. However, Poplar Fruit would not go easy on him just because he was a soldier. At this moment, Poplar Fruit could not afford to relax. There was no time to confront him. Poplar Fruit leaped and swung his knife horizontally. This move was very ordinary, but with Poplar Fruit's wind-like speed, it was very powerful. The man in black was shocked and hurriedly blocked with his baton. If he was a step slower, his arm would have been dismembered by Poplar Fruit. Even though he managed to block it, but with Yang Guo's powerful and heavy chop, his hand that was holding the baton was shaken to the point of almost letting go. However, Poplar Fruit's move was just a feint. The real killer move was yet to come. Without giving the man in black any time to react, Poplar Fruit actually let go of the knife in the air and threw a punch. The man in black subconsciously blocked it with his other hand. He was a soldier after all. He had experienced life and death situations in the past. His conditioned reflexes were also a part of his strength. However, Poplar Fruit's second punch was already coming. Poplar Fruit took a step forward and used his back foot as a fulcrum to punch with all his strength. If Meng Sanhua had the time to look down, he would be dumbfounded by what he saw. Because Poplar Fruit's attack speed and strength were half of what they had when they sparred. This time, the man in black did not have any time to react. Poplar Fruit's punch landed on his right shoulder. Half-step bursting fist. Back then, Guo Yunshan used half-step bursting fist to conquer the world. Although Poplar Fruit's half-step bursting fist was not as powerful as Guo Yunshan's, it was not far off. With a blood-curdling scream, the black-clothed man was sent flying backward. To make an iron-blooded veteran scream, the pain must be unbearable for normal people. Yes, Poplar Fruit's punch directly shattered his shoulder blade. Even if it did not KO him, it made him lose his ability to fight. Poplar Fruit was merciful. If it were not for Huang Yongning's previous warning, and if he did not want to become a bloodthirsty maniac, everyone could guess what would have happened if he had punched the man in black's head. However, defeating one man in black was not a big deal. Because there were already a few men in black with machetes swarming up. Poplar Fruit squatted down slightly and picked up the baton that the man in black had dropped. He did not use his previous knife mainly because the quality of that knife was too low and its lethality was too terrifying. One cut would definitely draw blood, so it was better to use this high-quality steel baton. Taking a deep breath, Yang Guo sank his qi into his dantian and stood on the stage, holding his staff in a defensive stance. In front of him stood a few thugs with machetes, and behind him was Duan Xueqing, who was still sitting on the chair, holding the rope on her body because her legs were weak. Poplar Fruit could not retreat, and there was no way to retreat. Li Zichao did not even look at the man in black who was struggling on the ground. He only paid attention to Poplar Fruit, who he hated to the core. However, now they had the upper hand in the situation. There were more than a dozen thugs. The human wave tactic could drown Poplar Fruit. The 5 reinforcements upstairs were still being entangled by the thugs because Huang Yongning had warned in the headset not to use guns unless it was the most dangerous time. So if they fought barehanded with the thugs with machetes, how could they end the battle so quickly? Chapter 992. Yang Guo stood in front of Duan Xueqing with his staff in hand. His aura was fierce and he actually managed to intimidate the thugs who were wielding blades. He had the aura of a man who could hold back 10,000 men. What are you waiting for? Chop him up. Li Zichao was impatient. He kicked one of the hatchet men away. The hatchet men were all from the underworld. They looked at each other and suddenly felt that they were very cowardly. Their opponent was only one person, and he wasn't holding a knife. He was only using a baton. How could they not dare to attack with knives? Chop him to death. One of the hatchet men shouted. Suddenly, everyone's morale was boosted. They shouted and waved their machetes at Poplar Fruit. Chop the old master to death. Poplar Fruit looked at the cold light that cut through the sky. He felt his scalp tingle. If he moved around, he could definitely take care of them one by one. But Duan Xueqing was behind him. If he dodged, wouldn't Duan Xueqing be in danger? Poplar Fruit could only brace himself and force himself to explode with faster speed and sharper eyesight. The baton in his hand disappeared. In less than a second, he blocked the 3 machetes. Then, he moved forward and pushed the 3 men who were facing Poplar Fruit back with brute force. At the same time, Poplar Fruit also dodged the 2 machetes that came from his left and right. He wouldn't show any mercy. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and swung his baton at the man on his right. There was a crisp sound. This heavy blow directly broke the hatchet man's arm. Don't doubt the power of the baton. Although Poplar Fruit didn't learn how to use the baton, this kind of steel baton was very lethal. The end of the baton was relatively thin, and the pressure it produced was very high. Compared to ordinary batons and pipes, it was more accurate to hit people. In addition, with Poplar Fruit's strength, breaking the arms was not a problem at all. As for the guy on the left, after Poplar Fruit dodged his machete, he suddenly let go of his right hand. His left hand grabbed the handle of the baton in the air and hit it horizontally. He only used the end of the handle to hit people. Poplar Fruit also hit a vital point and directly knocked the hatchet man on the left to the ground. Taking advantage of the fact that the people behind had yet to catch up, Yang Guo quickly swung the stick around like a game of whack-a-mole. The 3 people who had just struggled to get up on the ground were knocked unconscious by the stick on their head. Of course, Poplar Fruit was controlling his strength. He didn't cripple them and turn them into idiots. He only knocked them out, leaving a bright red bruise on their forehead. This was already considered merciful. Due to Poplar Fruit's strength, he had knocked out 5 people in an instant. The hatchet men behind him panicked and took a step back. Poplar Fruit was on guard when he suddenly heard a rustling sound. Then, Duan Xueqing let out a cry of surprise. Not good. Poplar Fruit shouted inwardly. Although the corner he had chosen was more suitable for defense, it was still a high platform. If someone noticed, they could still climb up from behind. Indeed, one of the clever hatchet men had found a loophole in Poplar Fruit's defense. Taking advantage of Poplar Fruit's carelessness, he wanted to climb up from behind. When Poplar Fruit turned around, the hatchet man had climbed up the high platform with a sneer on his face. He was about to pick up a machete that was placed to the side. If he were to catch Duan Xueqing, everything would be back to square one. Poplar Fruit would have no advantage. Thankfully, Poplar Fruit noticed it. He took a step back and threw the baton in his hand, smashing it directly into the hatchet man's face. A muffled sound rang out and the hatchet man was knocked unconscious. However, Poplar Fruit did not have a weapon in his hand. The hatchet men who had been frightened by him mustered up their courage. They shouted and brandished their machetes to attack. Poplar Fruit retreated to Duan Xueqing's side. He pulled her up and swung the armchair that she had been sitting on, The armchair was not sturdy. Although it had knocked one person over, it fell apart. Poplar Fruit quickly picked up Duan Shueching and jumped down from the high platform. Behind him, 6 or 7 hatchet men chased after him with machetes. They all jumped down one after another. Poplar Fruit only had one thought, which was to rush out with Duan Shueching in his arms. With his speed, he could get out of the warehouse and rush to Xiao Li's Land Rover. Poplar Fruit did not see that a figure had jumped down from the 2nd floor and stood between him and the hatchet men. "Stop. Put down the machete. If you don't, I'll shoot," Meng Sanhua shouted. He was the best in kung fu. After taking care of the hatchet men in front of him, he quickly jumped down from the metal frame on the 2nd floor. Meng Sanhua could not fight the hatchet men with his bare hands. He had to take out his pistol. However, no one believed him. The hatchet men were still chasing after him. Bang! A loud sound rang out. The world fell silent. The hatchet men, holding their machetes, stared blankly at the crater less than a meter away from them. They were all dumbfounded. Fuck! Was that a real gun? The hatchet men, who were arrogant just a moment ago, peed their pant. Who dared to be faster than a bullet? Seeing Meng Sanhua raise the gun and aim at them, the hatchet men threw their machetes aside and kneeled on the ground. They looked very professional. Since Meng Sanhua had taken out his gun, the remaining hatchet men on the 2nd floor were quickly defeated. He Wanjua and the rest escorted the surrendered hatchet men down the stairs. It was finally over. Poplar Fruit turned around and secretly sighed in relief. However, Poplar Fruit still had some complaints about Huang Yongning. If he had not been afraid of hurting Li Zichao and did not want to make a big deal out of this, he would have taken out his gun earlier. Wouldn't he have been able to take care of these guys directly? In Poplar Fruit's eyes, these guys were all trash. If he had not needed to protect Duan Shueching, Poplar Fruit could have taken care of 20 to 30 hatchet men by himself. Of course, he took advantage of the terrain to take a detour and take care of them one by one. Even so, Poplar Fruit's battle record was quite impressive. There were 11 people who had fallen in his hands. Among them, 2 were experts. One was knocked out by Poplar Fruit before he could fight back, and the others were not easy to deal with. Otherwise, He Wanjua and the rest of the special forces would not have taken so long to take care of them. Among them, all 11 had lost their ability to fight. Except for a few who were knocked out by Poplar Fruit mercifully, the rest had broken bones or were even disabled. Those who had not fainted or had woken up from the pain were rolling on the ground and wailing. "Call an ambulance." Huang Yongning looked at the mess left by Poplar Fruit from the top of the stairs and spoke to his teammates through the earpiece. However, there was a sudden change. A sudden gunshot made everyone's nerves tense. Chapter 993. Other than Li Zichao, who could not be dealt with, who was still showing off, the other thugs were obediently squatting on the side with their hands on their heads. There was no other way. These guys were either special forces or soldiers. They could not afford to offend them. Moreover, each of them had a gun in their hands. If they were accidentally killed, who would they cry to? Of course, none of the people who were beaten up by Poplar Fruit could stand up. Those who were unconscious were still unconscious. Those who were seriously injured were now wailing in pain. They would rather faint. On the other hand, the man in black whose shoulder blade was broken by Poplar Fruit was still a tough guy. He gritted his teeth and endured. Large beads of sweat kept appearing on his forehead. He Wanjua's gaze stopped on his face for a moment. However, he did not care. Even if they were comrades in the army in the past, now that they were accomplices to a villain, he was not worthy of his sympathy. Poplar Fruit supported Duan Shueching and sat down. He took out a pack of tissues and wiped the dirt on her face. He then borrowed a police jacket from Xiao Li and put it on her. Duan Shueching was not seriously injured. However, when she was struggling, her hands and feet had different degrees of abrasions. She looked a lot more haggard. "Does it hurt?" Poplar Fruit asked. Duan Shueching shook her head. She did not say anything. She only took the bottle of water from Poplar Fruit and took a sip. Her body was very weak. Compared to when she had just graduated from university, she was much thinner. Poplar Fruit could guess that this was all because of Pi Nh1. Duan Xueqing, after half a year, still could not get over it. Although she was cold and indifferent, as if she did not care about anything, she actually understood. It was just that all her emotions were stored in her heart and she did not want to communicate with others. From the way Duan Xueqing shouted for her to die, it could be seen that because of Pi Nh1, Duan Xueqing had been tortured to the point that she did not have any attachment to life. He didn't want to be a burden to others. Perhaps death was also a form of relief. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment before saying, Pi Nh1 is outside. Are you willing to meet him? To be honest, Poplar Fruit really didn't want to tell her about Pi Nh1. He didn't even want her to see Pi Nh1 again, because Pi Nh1 had already hurt her once. He had ruthlessly cut her heart with a knife. Who knew if their reunion would bring harm to Duan Xueqing a second time? However, Poplar Fruit thought about how Pi Nh1 was not any better than Duan Xueqing. He thought about how Pi Nh1 dragged his injured leg all the way to Yangcheng to look for him. He even got beaten up by him. He thought about how he was so anxious that he even cried today. Duan Xueqing slowly raised her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. From her expression and eyes, he could not see any fluctuations in her emotions. However, Poplar Fruit could still guess that her heart was in turmoil. It's because of him that I was able to save you. Poplar Fruit could not bear to see her like this. He sighed and said this. Duan Xueqing's eyes moved. It seemed that there were some emotions in them. Poplar Fruit briefly told her about how Pi Nh1 went to Yangcheng. He said with some regret, if it wasn't because I didn't trust him, you wouldn't have been captured. Duan Xueqing turned her head away. She did not want Poplar Fruit to see her face. Poplar Fruit only heard her hoarse voice as she softly said, that matter, was it him? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, it was him, but he was forced to do it in the past. Also, there are some things that he didn't lie to you about. For example, he really is a wedding photographer. Actually, he also received the punishment that he deserved. After he was taken away, one of his legs was broken. Why don't you give him a chance to make up for it? Poplar Fruit persuaded. Hearing a sniffling sound, Duan Xueqing straightened her neck and said, that's enough. After that, she did not say anything else. Poplar Fruit waited for a long time. He did not know if Duan Xueqing was willing to give Pi Nh1 a chance to apologize. Scratching his head, Poplar Fruit secretly sighed and said in his heart, forget it, bye. I've already helped you up to this point. It can be considered that I've done my best. It wasn't easy to open up a heart that had been sealed for half a year. Perhaps Pi Nh1 would persevere and pursue Duan Xueqing again. After half a year, or even longer, there was still hope for him to succeed. After all, Duan Xueqing still had feelings for him last year. While Poplar Fruit was comforting Duan Xueqing, the others were cleaning up the mess. Huang Yongning looked at the wounded lying on the high platform in disarray and couldn't help but feel a little frightened. This lethality. Huang Yongning turned to look at He Wenjue and shook his head with a bitter smile. Is he really not from your army? He Wenjue, on the other hand, was very calm. He was already used to this scene. He smiled and said, I hope that he is from our army. He usually comes to our place as a sparring partner and lets them play with his strength. What was there to be surprised about? He Wenjue was with Poplar Fruit at the bank. He saw Poplar Fruit beat the gangsters to death and even broke the bank's tile floor. Now these guys, Poplar Fruit must have gone easy on them. Captain, what should we do with these people? Meng Sanhua asked as he kicked a thug who secretly looked up. He Wenjue turned to look at Huang Yongning and asked, can you handle it here? Huang Yongning smiled and said, it's okay. Just a few hooligans. He hesitated and pointed at Li Zichao who was glaring at Poplar Fruit. He said, that guy is a bit tricky. Didn't you say not to arrest him? Letting him go is giving face to the people behind him. If they still give you trouble, let me know. He Wenjue patted his chest and said. At this time, Li Zichao's phone rang. He jumped down and went to get it. No one stopped him. She only heard him grumble a few words before he hung up the phone. Li Zichao walked over and looked at Huang Yongning casually. He flicked his bangs and snorted, Are you happy now? If it's okay, I'm leaving. My dad is calling me for dinner. I have to catch a plane. If I'm late, will you be responsible? I really want to beat him up, Meng Sanhua muttered to Yang Jingdong as he twisted his foot on the ground. Forget it. Don't bother with this asshole. Yang Jingdong shook his head. Captain and the others can't do anything to him. He Wenjue chose to ignore Li Zichao's provocation. Huang Yongning, on the other hand, took 2 deep breaths and pointed at the exit with his left hand. He smiled and said, "Please." Li Zichao snorted and proudly shook his head as he walked outside. He didn't even look at his 2 bodyguards on the ground. When he passed by Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing, Poplar Fruit took a step forward and stood in front of Duan Xueqing. Li Zichao chuckled and mouthed silently, "This is not over." Poplar Fruit's face was as calm as water. But in his eyes, there was a burst of murderous intent. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Chapter 994. Although Yang Guo was very calm, she looked like a wild beast that wanted to devour people. This made Li Zichao's heart suddenly lose confidence. He couldn't help but take 2 steps back. He felt that it was too embarrassing for him to be so cowardly. He waved his hand, snorted, and left. Bah! Meng Sanhua waited until he was out of the door and spat at his back in disgust. What a piece of trash! At this time, they heard Xiao Li's question in their headphones. "Captain, why did he come out?" Hey, don't go." Xiao Li was waiting for the ambulance outside when he saw Li Zichao who was about to leave. He stopped him. This caused a physical conflict with Li Zichao who was already irritated. How could Li Zichao be beaten by Xiao Li? He was immediately pressed to the ground. Xiao Li pressed on the headset, which also transmitted Li Zichao's scolding. Huang Yongning pressed the headphones and said irritably, "Okay, let him go. Why keep him? You can't catch him." "Roger," Xiao Li shouted. He then stood up from Li Zichao's back, but he didn't even help him. He was extremely disgusted with Li Zichao's hedonistic son. Li Zichao got up, patted the dust off his body, and shook his head dizzily. He pointed at Xiao Li fiercely and said, "You've got guts, I'll remember you." Xiao Li waved his arm and glared at him. Li Zichao was shocked. He took a few steps forward and quickly got into his BMW. He didn't bring his car with him to Jiangnan. This car was borrowed from a nightclub owner. He started the car and left. Before he left, Li Zichao didn't forget to stick his head out and give Xiao Li the middle finger. "Let him drive away, that son of a bitch." Xiao Li pressed the headphones and said angrily, "Forget it, don't worry about him. We can't afford to offend them." Huang Yongning comforted. After Li Zichao left the warehouse, Poplar Fruit walked over and asked, "Brother Huang, can we leave first? I want to send Xueqing home. Look at her. She's hungry, tired, and injured." He hadn't called the Duan family yet. He planned to call them when he sent her home. Huang Yongning looked at He Wenjue, and He Wenjue nodded. Huang Yongning then said, "All right, you guys go back first. But wait a moment, I'll get Mr. Bai to drive our car over." Huang Yongning pressed his headset and shouted, "Mr. Bai, can you help us drive the car over? Everything here is settled. Big brother He, what about you guys?" Poplar Fruit looked at He Wenjue and asked. He Wenjue walked over and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. He smiled and said, "All right, don't worry about me. I'll help you deal with the aftermath. When the time comes, we'll directly return to the military base. You just have to take care of your own matters. But, you brat, why did you provoke another little girl?" He Wenjue said with some blame. "What do you want Feng Beibei to think of you?" Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head and said, "No, big brother, what are you thinking? This is only my junior sister. Feng Beibei is my girlfriend." As he spoke, Huang Yongning took out his headset and looked at it strangely. He stuffed it back in and called Mr. Bai a few times. This made Poplar Fruit and the rest look over in confusion. No response. Did he put his headset aside and fall asleep? Huang Yongning smiled and asked, "Little Yang, can you give him a call?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, "My phone is in the car." How about this? I'll take Xueqing outside to get some fresh air and give him a call. That works too. Huang Yongning nodded and said, there's no rush. Why don't you just drive over and wake him up? There are 2 cars. You can also drive little Li over. It's too far. We won't be able to get there in 10 minutes. Poplar Fruit walked over and lowered his body. He said to Du and Xueqing, come, let's go home. Can you walk? Do you want me to carry you? I can walk. Du and Xueqing shook her head. She gritted her teeth and slowly stood up with Poplar Fruit's help. Her legs were still weak. She had been tied up with ropes for too long. Without blood circulation, she felt like she was being pricked by needles. She only felt a little better now. After helping Du and Xueqing to the car outside, little Li quickly opened the car door for Poplar Fruit so that he could help Du and Xueqing into the back seat. However, there was a sudden loud bang, as if something had exploded. They were all stunned. The sound was too loud. The entire warehouse was buzzing. It even felt as if it had happened right beside them. Poplar Fruit immediately shielded Du and Xueqing, while little Li quickly covered his head and squatted on the ground. It seems like it's fine. It's not here. Poplar Fruit reacted faster. He stood up and patted little Li. Little Li stood up and took out his pistol. He pulled out Poplar Fruit and said in a deep voice, be careful, it sounds like an explosion. Poplar Fruit. The people in the warehouse also heard the noise and rushed out. He Wenjue ran the fastest. He thought that something had happened to Poplar Fruit, and that it might have been Li Zichao's backup plan. He shouted in shock and anger as he rushed out. Big brother, I'm fine. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and shouted, it's not here. That's good. Huang Yongning also rushed out, leaving 2 people inside to watch. He frowned and asked, where did the explosion happen? There's smoke over there. Little Li, who had just looked around, exclaimed. He pointed at the black smoke rising in the distance. Poplar Fruit looked in the direction of the smoke. In the far west, reflecting the afterglow of the setting sun, a wisp of black smoke could be clearly seen rising into the sky. It was the most disharmonious part of this poignant scene. That place. Huang Yongning frowned and murmured. Where we came from. The only road out. Poplar Fruit's judgment was very accurate. He said with certainty. Because that was the place where he had just driven in. Wait. Poplar Fruit seemed to have thought of something. Huang Yongning and He Wenjue also thought of something. Only Du and Xueqing was still in a daze. She was not in the best state of mind, and she was also shocked by the explosion. How could she keep up with their thoughts? Pi nh1? Poplar Fruit swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He and He Wenjue looked at each other. Oh no. Huang Yongning murmured to himself. His eyebrows were knitted together. This is troublesome. What? Du and Xueqing began to react. She seemed to have realized something. Her calm eyes widened, and suddenly, they were filled with tears. This was a rare display of panic on her part. Quick, quick. Poplar Fruit pulled open the driver's seat and got in. He shouted, get in the car, let's go take a look. Let's go save people. In August, everyone, please vote for us. Xiaohan thanks Tilda. Chapter 995. After Poplar Fruit and the others moved out, Pi nh1 crouched alone at the root of a tree with his head between his knees. He looked like a street thug, but no one looked at him, because no one would pass by here. Pi nh1 could hear the exchange between the SWAT team and the special forces through his earpiece. It was like a live broadcast, and he could hear the ups and downs and thrilling twists and turns from beginning to end. Oh no, they have an expert. There are so many people. I'm going down, but there are people on the 2nd and 3rd floors. We can't alert them. Why didn't Poplar Fruit fight back? Was he beaten up? Can he still stand up? We have to do something. Or else. No, Poplar Fruit is not that weak. Let's wait and see what he's doing. No, he'll be beaten to death. They're drawing their swords. Wow, why is Poplar Fruit so strong? He killed 3 people by himself. Move. We can't wait any longer. I'm going to kill you. Wait, everyone, listen to me. They don't have guns. Don't use guns. Meng Sanhua. Forget it, don't kill him. Damn. Who shot him? It's that Li guy. Fuck, he almost killed little Yang. Luckily, Yang saved him and hid him. I'll kill him. Wait, don't hurt him. Let me do it. The series of exchanges gave Pi NH1 a complete picture of the fight in the warehouse. However, Pi NH1 raised his head, and his face was full of tears. To be honest, a man crying looked like a weak and dispirited piece of trash. Pi NH1 hated himself for not being able to protect Duan Xueqing in advance, and for not being able to save her from the abyss of suffering. He could only limp and hide under a tree where the wind didn't even blow. He was so useless. What do you use to love her? Pi NH1 questioned himself again and again. What people feared the most was falling in love. Pi NH1 was like that. After the tea house, he started to lose himself in Duan Xueqing's peaceful aura. He forgot his identity and his mission. Then, he used his love to hurt this pure and innocent girl who stood alone in this world. Really, Pi NH1, you don't deserve to love her. Yang Guo's words were still circling around his ears. I advise you not to have too much hope. Xueqing will never forgive you. Who asked you to deceive her? To take advantage of her feelings? Yes, not only did Poplar Fruit understand Duan Xueqing, Pi NH1 also understood Duan Xueqing very well. He knew that this stubborn girl's heart was like a piece of glass. One side was beautiful, while the other side was evil. If he wanted her to admit that there was beauty in evil, then he had to break this piece of glass. At the same time, her heart would die. The gangster was stiff. Pi NH1 struggled to get up, held the key, opened the door of the outermost Mazda, and sat inside. Pi NH1's hands trembled. He twisted the key a few times before he could light the car. Pi NH1 listened to the conversation in his earpiece silently. He paid attention to how Duan Xueqing was rescued by Poplar Fruit from thousands of soldiers and horses. Driving was really a big problem for him. Pi NH1's left leg was not only a little out of shape, but it was also injured. He couldn't exert any strength at all. Gritting his teeth, Pi NH1 finally dragged his right leg over and stepped on the clutch. He shifted the car into first gear and slowly started the car. When he drove onto the straight road, Pi NH1 stepped on the clutch and shifted into neutral, then stepped on the brake. He looked at the road deeply. He couldn't see anything. This is not good. Pi NH1 started the car again with difficulty. He stopped the car at a crossroad that was perpendicular to the road just now. Pulling the handbrake, Pi NH1's hands trembled. He held the phone and did nothing. He just sat there in a daze. Later, he manually pressed the phone, but no one knew what he pressed on the phone, because a teardrop fell on the screen. It was like a broken raindrop, blurring the screen into a mess. Soon, Xiao Li's questioning voice came through the earpiece. Huang Yongning said helplessly, "Okay, let him go. What's the point of keeping him? You can't catch him." In the end, Li Zichao drove away. Xiao Li reported in the earpiece, "Let him drive away. That son of a bitch." Pi NH1 heard it clearly. His face became paler and paler. His hands trembled, and he almost couldn't hold the phone anymore. In the end, no one knew what he did. He just took the phone back and put it in his pocket with trembling hands. Holding the steering wheel tightly, Pi NH1 forced his hands to stabilize. He took deep breaths, and finally wiped away his tears. He resolutely dragged his right leg and stepped on the clutch. He changed gears, released the handbrake, and released the clutch. The car began to move slowly. In the distance, two headlights appeared in the front right. It was that person's car. That's right, Pi NH1 couldn't see the car's model. He could only see the two headlights from afar. At this moment, his thoughts were clearer than ever. It was like a computer loaded with the latest CPU. The two roads and two cars formed a clear picture in his mind. This is the time. His swollen eyes suddenly opened. It was as if there was a burst of dazzling light. Pi NH1 gritted his teeth, stepped on the accelerator, stepped on the clutch, and changed gears. Although only one leg could be used, Pi NH1 showed agility that even racers didn't have. Second gear. Third gear. Fourth gear. Fifth gear. In less than 7 seconds, Pi NH1 suddenly moved the car to 5th gear. He completely let go of the clutch and stepped on the gas pedal to its limit. 60, 70, 80. The needle on the speedometer was rising crazily. 90, 100, 120, 140, 160. It was too fast. No, it was even faster. 170, 180. It was almost off the chart. Pi NH1 grabbed the steering wheel and stared into the distance. He didn't care if the brakes would work at such a fast speed. Yes, in his mind, there was no such thing as brakes. In his eyes, there was only the distance. There was only the BMW in front of him. There was only the frightened face that he could see. Bang! There was a loud sound. However, Pi NH1 couldn't hear it. He couldn't hear anything. It was as if the world had become very quiet. It was as quiet as the tea room where he used to smile and drink tea with her. It was as if he was flying in the air. The sky was so beautiful. The intoxicating sunset, the slanting afterglow. It was like that time when Duan Shueching came to his shop as a guest. The two of them sat until evening, and then he sent her back. The sunset at that time was also so long and beautiful. I'm so tired. Let me rest for a while, okay? He quietly rested under the tree, quietly lying down. Quietly, a white flower floated to the side of his hand. It seemed to be the most beautiful snow lotus on the ice mountain. In August, everyone, please vote for me. Xiaohan thanks Tilda. Chapter 996. Poplar Fruit and the others arrived by car. Not only Duan Shueching, but Poplar Fruit was also stunned when he opened the car door. The scene was like a battlefield, and it was horrible to look at. The most shocking thing was the BMW that Li Zichao had driven away. It had been broken into 2 pieces, like a destroyer that had been hit by a missile, broken in half, and sunk. Without even looking, they could guess that the people in the car were no longer whole, because they couldn't find a complete body. The steering wheel had fallen to one side, and a limb was hanging on it. The rest of the body was scattered along with the car seat. Not only that, but the pieces of the BMW's front were burning. The black smoke that Poplar Fruit and the others had seen just now should be the smoke from the burning. Fortunately, because the front of the car was broken, and the fuel tank was cracked, only the gasoline that flowed out was ignited, and it didn't cause a more serious explosion. God! Huang Yongning stood at the door of the car, grabbing the hair on his head, feeling a little anxious. He was pushed away, and Duan Shueching, who had been hungry for a day and a night and was very weak, squeezed out of the back seat. She stumbled on the ground, and Poplar Fruit rushed over to support her. Looking at the miserable situation on the ground, her tears flowed down, but she didn't make any sound. It was as if her spirit had been separated from her body, and she could no longer connect with it. Over here! Xiao Li, who had walked a little further away, shouted. Poplar Fruit and the others hurried over. During the collision, the Mazda's speed was too fast. Even if it tore the BMW apart, and even if it was destroyed, it still flew more than 30 meters away due to inertia. Dragging a long black tire mark, the front of the Mazda had become a squashed piece of scrap iron, and the body of the car was distorted. Where is she? Poplar Fruit asked Xiao Li anxiously. She's gone. He probably flew out of the front window of the car. Xiao Li shook his head and said as he picked up the airbag that had already turned into scrap. Pi NH1 didn't wear a safety belt. Yes, he didn't think about his own survival. He crashed into the wall with the courage to face death with equanimity. Could he have jumped away the moment he crashed into the car? Poplar Fruit asked expectantly. It wasn't impossible. Isn't this how it usually goes in the movies? Poplar Fruit was just overthinking. Before Poplar Fruit could give Duan Shueching hope again, Xiao Li shook his head and said, impossible, and there are bloodstains on the glass. It could only be nearby. They split up and searched. Soon, Meng Sanhua raised his hand and sighed. He called out softly, here. They gathered around, but Poplar Fruit didn't move. He held Duan Shueching in his arms and felt her struggle. He frowned and whispered, don't look, okay? Duan Shueching shook her head and threw out a few drops of tears. She looked very stubborn and even wanted to break free from Poplar Fruit to look for herself. Poplar Fruit was worried about her and had to help her walk over. When they got closer, they saw a person lying quietly under the tree. Both Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing recognized him at a glance. It was as if the air and time had stopped flowing. That person had never been so peaceful. Even the frown that had been frowning for months was now gone, as if he had been released. Even the iceberg-like Duan Xueqing was unable to control herself at this moment. She covered her mouth and began to cry. She seemed to have lost all her strength. If not for Poplar Fruit's strong arms holding her, she would have collapsed to the ground. Poplar Fruit looked over. Meng Sanhua, who was squatting on the ground, withdrew his hand and shook his head at Poplar Fruit. "Let me try." Poplar Fruit called Xiao Li and asked him to help Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit squatted down and gently turned Pi Nh1 over. He supported his back with both hands and slowly let him lie on the ground. There was a scar on Pi Nh1's head. It was probably from the car window. Fortunately, there were no injuries on his face. He looked peaceful. Poplar Fruit used his internal energy and gently pressed on Pi Nh1's chest with both hands. In other people's eyes, he was performing CPR on Pi Nh1. In fact, Poplar Fruit wanted to see if he could revive Pi Nh1 through the stimulation of his internal energy. Once, twice. However, even though Poplar Fruit increased the output of his internal energy, Pi Nh1 didn't move at all. He was already dead. No matter how powerful Poplar Fruit was, there was nothing he could do. After all, he wasn't the king of hell. For the first time, Poplar Fruit felt so powerless. He didn't want to give up, but every time he pressed down, it would only consume his internal energy in vain. Seeing that Poplar Fruit's face was a little pale, Hiwanjua took a step forward and pulled Poplar Fruit's arm, pulling him up. Hiwanjua pressed on Poplar Fruit's shoulder, shook it, and woke him up loudly. "Poplar Fruit, he's already dead. Wake up." Poplar Fruit's face was pale, not only because of the consumption of his internal energy, but also because of the fact that Pi Nh1, who was still alive just a moment ago, was now silent. Life was actually so fragile. Back then, Wu Yu was also like this. She held his hand and was sent into the delivery room by him. A few hours later, she was sent out covered with a white cloth. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that he was so helpless on the verge of life and death. This was different from the enemy's corpses that Poplar Fruit had seen before. Wu Yu was his daughter's mother, and Pi Nh1 was also an existence that was both a friend and a foe. In fact, after saving Duan Xueqing, Poplar Fruit no longer regarded him as his enemy. "I even hit him before," Poplar Fruit muttered to himself, but Hiwanjua could not hear him clearly. Hiwanjua comforted him and said, "It's okay, it's okay." Poplar Fruit was not that weak, but he felt a little uncomfortable. He pushed Hiwanjua away and forced a smile. He walked in front of Duan Xueqing, who was already crying, and stood in front of her to comfort her. "A dead person can't come back to life. Xueqing, don't be so sad." However, Poplar Fruit's comfort could not even convince himself. Duan Xueqing threw herself into his arms and cried loudly. This was the first time she had vented her emotions so openly since junior high school. Her crying voice was already hoarse, and her tears had already dried up. Huang Yongning and the others stood in front of Pi Nh1 solemnly, and there was a trace of respect in their eyes. They respected Pi Nh1's feelings and courage. Pi Nh1 did what this group of powerful soldiers and special police officers wanted to do but did not dare to do. However, a moment of pleasure would leave behind endless troubles. How are we going to explain this? Huang Yongning looked at Hiwanjua with a bitter smile. In the distance, the flashing lights of ambulances and police cars were reflected in his eyes. Hiwanjua patted the dust on his shoulders, gritted his teeth, and snorted, "I'll deal with it when it comes. I'm not afraid of him. At the beginning of the month, I beg everyone to vote for me. Although I can't get on the list, I want more readers to be able to read this book." Chapter 997. It was very late at night, but the Duan residence was still brightly lit. After Duan Xueqing was sent home, she fainted from excessive sadness and tears. The Duan family hired a doctor to give her an 4 drip and a nutrient drip to replenish her body's energy. They also asked a few nannies to take turns to take care of her, worried that she would commit suicide after she woke up. The problem now was not the injured or the aftermath of the accident, but how to appease the Li family's anger. Huang Yongning and He Wenjue had already gone to help find Duan Xueqing, but Poplar Fruit had no choice but to stay at the Duan residence to help take care of Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit, why don't you rest for a while? Duan Xueqing's elder brother, Duan Yongfeng, walked over. He was a man in his 30s and was now the second person in charge of the Duan family other than Father Duan. However, after such a big incident, he was also a little battered and his hair was a little white. Poplar Fruit was indeed tired now. He was mentally and physically exhausted. Moreover, he had used too much internal energy, so he could not be as active as usual without sleeping or resting. Okay. Poplar Fruit nodded. He touched his body and looked up. I left my phone in the car. I'll go get it first. Poplar Fruit had been wholeheartedly immersed in the series of battles and troubles. He had not taken his phone out of the car. When he took it out to take a look, his phone was almost bursting with missed calls. Most of them were from Feng Beibei, but there were also many calls from Zheng Yujie. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and breathed out tiredly. He muttered to himself, "Oh no, I forgot." When he returned to the bedroom that the Duan family had prepared for him, Poplar Fruit prepared to call his girlfriend. After coming out of the house, he did not call Feng Beibei. Feng Beibei must have been worried and scared the whole day. However, just as he picked up his phone, Zhang Yujie's call came in. What a coincidence. He had just picked up his phone. Zhang Yujie hadn't received the news yet. She was just worried about Poplar Fruit's safety. Hearing her criticism, Poplar Fruit was a little touched. However, when it came to the troublesome matter of Li Zichao being killed, Zheng Yujie also became serious. Although the Li family was in its twilight years, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Who knew how crazy the Li family would be after the death of their eldest son? Zheng Yujie needed to ask her father for help, so she gave Poplar Fruit a few simple instructions and said, "I'll come to you tomorrow." Then she hung up the phone in a hurry. At this time, Poplar Fruit's head was a little heavy. He washed his face with cold water and quickly pressed Feng Beibei's phone. Uncle Tilda, the phone was connected not long after. Poplar Fruit heard Feng Beibei's tired voice. She was a little wronged. Poplar Fruit could understand Feng Beibei's feelings. She hadn't slept yet, so she must have been waiting for his call. She probably hadn't been able to rest well for the whole day. He said apologetically, "Baby, I'm sorry. I forgot to leave my phone in the car. You didn't answer it for the whole day." Feng Beibei said aggrievedly. "Because something big happened." Poplar Fruit patiently explained to Feng Beibei. "Something big happened?" Feng Beibei was shocked and asked, "Senior Sister Duan wasn't rescued?" "She was rescued." Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "Xueqing wasn't injured, but she was too sad. Do you still remember that Pi NH1? En. Feng Beibei obviously remembered. A few days ago, Poplar Fruit even saw him. "He's dead," Poplar Fruit said in a low voice. "He was driving and collided with that Li Zichao. The two of them died together." Ah. Feng Beibei was shocked. She suddenly remembered that she was so focused on venting her grievances to Poplar Fruit that she forgot to care about Poplar Fruit. She hurriedly asked, "Uncle, then are you injured?" She was so scared that her voice was choked with sobs. Poplar Fruit's heart warmed and comforted her. "I'm fine. When they collided, we weren't at the scene. When we were saving Xueqing at the warehouse, Big Brother He and the others also came to Jiangnan to help, so it went very smoothly." Poplar Fruit could only report the good news and not the bad news to Feng Beibei. He didn't dare to tell Feng Beibei about the difficulties and dangers of saving Duan Xueqing. "It's because something so big happened that I was dizzy the whole afternoon and night. I forgot to take my phone out of the car." Poplar Fruit gently comforted her and said, "Baby, don't worry. I'm fine. Uncle, when are you coming back?" Feng Beibei's emotions calmed down a little and asked, "I might not be able to come back in the next 2 days." Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "Li Zichao is in some trouble. I can't explain it in a few words. When I come back in the future, I'll tell you in detail. After a pause, Poplar Fruit said, besides, after Pi NH1 died, the impact on Xueqing is still very big. If I stay, I can comfort her. Fong Beibei was silent for a while, then said, oh. She felt wronged. Poplar Fruit continued, these few days, you'll have to work harder at home and help take care of Kiki. Then what about you? You didn't bring any clothes. Fong Beibei said. Tomorrow, Zhang Yujie will come over. Help pack some clothes and ask her to bring them to me. Worried that Fong Beibei would think too much, Poplar Fruit pretended to be cheerful and said with a smile, don't worry, it's not what you think. She's coming over to help me solve Li Zichao's problem. Li Zichao is from a political family. His death is very troublesome. So I have to ask Zhang Yujie to ask her father to explain, Poplar Fruit said. After a while, Fong Beibei said, oh. Her voice was much louder than before. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and smiled bitterly. He knew that his girlfriend was in a bad mood again. He sighed and said, baby, don't throw a tantrum. You know that I'm very tired now. Who's throwing a tantrum with you? Fong Beibei was aggrieved and angry. She sniffed and said, you didn't answer the phone all day. Do you know how worried I was about you? You're very tired. Do you know that I haven't slept since you left in the middle of the night? You said that I was throwing a tantrum. Fong Beibei cried aggrievedly. Poplar Fruit's heart suddenly softened. He stood up with his mobile phone and comforted his girlfriend. He kept apologizing and saying that he was wrong. Finally, Poplar Fruit spent more than an hour to appease Fong Beibei's temper. Poplar Fruit knew that Fong Beibei was still a little unhappy in her heart. If he wanted to eliminate the grudge with Fong Beibei, he had to go home and slowly get used to it. She was angry because of love. She promised that she wouldn't be angry because of love. Fong Beibei gradually realized that Poplar Fruit might be really tired today. Usually, she didn't feel that his reaction would be as slow as today. Fong Beibei took a step back with a little grievance. The two said good night to each other and reluctantly hung up the phone. Chapter 998. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but fall into a deep sleep. He didn't even take a shower, as he needed sleep to restore his energy. However, Fong Beibei couldn't sleep. She didn't leave the sofa in the living room. Previously, she was afraid that the phone call would disturb Kiki, so she came down. But now, she curled up on the sofa in a daze. Her eyes were dull, and there was only fatigue and confusion left. Fong Beibei completely understood Poplar Fruit's way of dealing with things. She had always had great confidence in Poplar Fruit. She believed that he wasn't a playboy, and that he would be unswerving for his family and her. However, the experience of her first love in the past made her completely lose her sense of security. This was something that she didn't feel before. Fong Beibei was afraid of losing him. Subconsciously, she kept thinking that Poplar Fruit would abandon her. Even though she had confidence in Poplar Fruit, she couldn't help but keep scaring herself subconsciously. Moreover, Poplar Fruit didn't do it perfectly. Although he was indeed a perfect boyfriend, husband, and Kiki's father at home, he had too many confidants outside. Not to mention others, just Zheng Yujie and Duan Xueqing, Fong Beibei felt a deep threat. Duan Xueqing was fine. After all, Poplar Fruit had clearly rejected her, and she had decided to give up. But what about Zhang Yujie? Poplar Fruit didn't hide it from her. Fong Beibei knew that Zhang Yujie had pursued Poplar Fruit, and Poplar Fruit had also rejected her. However, Zhang Yujie still pursued her. Compared to Zhang Yujie, Fong Beibei had no chance of winning. In terms of family background and social status, Zhang Yujie wasn't something that Fong Beibei could hope for, and in terms of appearance. Although in Poplar Fruit's eyes, Fong Beibei was prettier than Zhang Yujie, Poplar Fruit said so himself, in a woman's eyes, beauty didn't only refer to bare face, but also to dressing up and even makeup. In these aspects, Fong Beibei had a deep sense of inferiority when standing in front of Zhang Yujie. Just like an ugly duckling seeing a white swan, Fong Beibei would always feel ashamed of her fashion and maturity. Of course, Poplar Fruit had told her before, "No, I like your pure and innocent look." However, Fong Beibei didn't take it to heart. She felt that men were carnivores, and they would definitely be driven by their natural instincts to like women with good figures. For Poplar Fruit's career, Fong Beibei had made a lot of sacrifices. For example, she didn't act like the girls in TV dramas, who insisted that Poplar Fruit stay away from Zheng Yujie, a seductive woman. Instead, she chose to believe in Poplar Fruit and swallow her anger. However, today, she had a quarrel with Poplar Fruit. It was the first time that they had a quarrel since they started dating. No, it should be said that it was the first time that Poplar Fruit didn't go along with her and comfort her. Instead, he criticized her. This gave Fong Beibei an illusion. She felt that Poplar Fruit had changed, and he didn't love her anymore. Such chaotic thoughts accompanied Fong Beibei throughout the long night. She didn't rest until she couldn't stand it anymore and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Fong Beibei was awakened by a dream. She dreamed that Poplar Fruit really left her. Her head hurt, and the things in the dream were blurred. She only remembered that Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and left without looking back. In the direction that Poplar Fruit left, Zheng Yujie was smiling at her, and she was smiling very proudly. Although it was a dream, it made Fong Beibei, who couldn't sleep for a while, feel even more tired. She touched the pillow, but it was already soaked with tears. She didn't know when she fell into a deep sleep, but she also didn't know when she was woken up by Kiki and Goldie. Kiki didn't know when she woke up, and then she climbed down from upstairs and ran around the living room with Goldie, who woke up early. Finally, she pulled Fong Beibei's jade hand that was sleeping on the sofa. Goldie also curiously licked Fong Beibei and woke her up. Beibei Jejie, Beibei Jejie. Kiki. Fong Beibei supported half of her body to get up. She rubbed her red eyes, and her head was heavy and dizzy. Beibei Jejie, get up. Kiki pulled Fong Beibei's hand and said, Kiki wants to wash her face. Without any hesitation, Fong Beibei struggled to get up, patted Kiki's little head, and went to the bedroom on the second floor to get Kiki's towel and toothbrush. Kiki immediately followed into the bathroom. Brush your teeth first. Fong Beibei's voice was a bit hoarse. She helped Kiki apply toothpaste, and then handed it to her. Brush brush brush, brush brush brush. Kiki stood on the chair, looked at herself in the mirror, and happily shook her little butt. Don't move when you brush your teeth. Today, Fong Beibei really didn't have the mood to play with Kiki. She gently pulled Kiki's rabbit hairband, and lifted up her hair to prevent the toothpaste foam from getting on her hair. Kiki pressed the switch of the electric toothbrush, and put it into her mouth. In the past, Poplar Fruit brushed Kiki's teeth with an ordinary toothbrush. When he taught her how to brush her teeth herself, she didn't want to learn. Later, it was Fong Beibei who decided to give Kiki a more cute cartoon electric toothbrush. Not only did the toothbrush look good, but the automatic toothbrush also made Kiki very happy. After brushing her teeth, Fong Beibei used a warm wet towel to wipe Kiki's face very carefully. However, Kiki also noticed that Fong Beibei's eyes were swollen and bloodshot. Sister Beibei, why do you have big white rabbit eyes? Kiki's two cold little hands rubbed Fong Beibei's eyes gently, and she asked curiously, did you cry like Kiki? Fong Beibei shook her head, squeezed out a smile, and said gently, no, it's just that Sister Beibei didn't sleep well yesterday. Kiki is so sensible, you know how to care about Sister Beibei. Kiki's face smiled, twisted a little, and said shyly, Papa also said that Kiki has grown up. Because of Kiki, Fong Beibei's mood was much better. She helped Kiki take off the rabbit hairband, and then used a comb to smooth out Kiki's messy hair after waking up in the morning, and then tied it into a goat horn braid. Am I pretty? Fong Beibei pressed Kiki's shoulder, and asked her to look in the mirror. Yes. Kiki turned around on the chair, and said with satisfaction. She pulled Fong Beibei's arm, looked up, and urged, Sister Beibei also wash your face, Sister Beibei also has to be beautiful. Why are you all up so early? Chen Anlan rubbed her eyes and walked out of the guest room on the first floor. She was woken up by their laughter. Fong Beibei smiled and said, Good morning, Sister Anlan. I'm sorry to wake you up. It's okay, it's okay. Chen Anlan waved her hand and said, Coincidentally, I'm also about to get up and exercise. Kiki, do you want to join me? Okay. Kiki will teach you Ben Fist, okay? Kiki climbed down from the chair, and without anyone's help, she ran out of the bathroom while giggling. Fong Beibei smiled and watched her jump out. Although she was still very tired, her mood was indeed a lot better. Chapter 999. On the first floor, Chen Anlan was playing with Kiki. Fong Beibei went upstairs to tidy up a little, then went back to bed to sleep. This time, she slept more comfortably and soon fell asleep, until Chen Anlan woke her up. Beibei, brother Xiong downstairs said that a woman is coming up. Her name is Zhang Yujie, Chen Anlan said to Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei paused for a while, as if she was too sleepy to react. She said, "Let her come up." Fong Beibei went to the bathroom to wash her face, then combed her messy hair to make herself look more energetic. Then, she carried a small suitcase that she had prepared and went downstairs. Poplar Fruit's new home, the decoration is pretty good. It's my first time here. Zhang Yujie had already come in. She took off her sunglasses and looked around elegantly. "Auntie, Kiki will take you to see Kiki's room." Kiki and Zhang Yujie were also very friendly, and wanted to take Zhang Yujie upstairs. Hearing their conversation, Fong Beibei, who was going downstairs, changed her expression slightly. She walked over and looked at Zhang Yujie, who was still gorgeously dressed, and her expression was a little ugly. Zhang Yujie was dressed very simply today. She wore a lotus purple chiffon shirt that was sleeveless like a tank top, revealing her beautiful arms. The slim lines and loose double hem showed her good figure and elegant posture. The chiffon blouse paired with white slim-fit trousers vividly displayed the advantage of her long legs. She looked like an elegant white-collar beauty, but also like a fashionable city beauty. Not only did Fong Beibei have mixed feelings, but Chen Anlan, who had nothing to do with her, also felt a lot of pressure. He felt that this woman's aura was too strong, and the light of fashion was too aggressive. Zhang Yujie's fashion could always be combined perfectly with her. It was something that others could neither envy nor learn. Fong Beibei's heart was alarmed. She felt wronged and thought, she's really not giving up. She's going to see my uncle, but she still has to dress up so beautifully. Fong Beibei misunderstood Zhang Yujie. Zhang Yujie did not dress up deliberately. Yesterday, she was busy for a long time because of Poplar Fruit. She even went to see Zheng Mingsheng early in the morning. When she came back and tidied up, Zhang Yujie did not have time to put on makeup. She only put on some foundation to cover the dark circles under her eyes. As for the clothes, she had just bought them recently. She casually picked a matching set of clothes to wear. Zhang Yujie could only say, "I can't help it. I'm beautiful, so I look good in whatever I wear." In fact, Fong Beibei did not know that when Zhang Yujie saw her, she was also muttering in her heart, "I really don't understand why Poplar Fruit is so loyal to her. She's just a little younger and has better skin." Zhang Yujie still subconsciously felt that Fong Beibei was more beautiful than her. It was just that women were not willing to admit it. When the two met, the atmosphere between them became tense before they spoke. "Beibei, did you just get up?" Zhang Yujie smiled and said, "I won't stay here with you. Poplar Fruit is still waiting for me in Jiangnan. He said yesterday that he was fine." Fong Beibei was a little depressed. She bit her lower lip and said, "It's not a big deal. I have to help him deal with the aftermath. This guy is really worrisome. Maybe it was because Poplar Fruit was not here today, or maybe it was because of other reasons." Zhang Yujie did not know why, but today, she spoke as if she was deliberately showing off. Fong Beibei was angry. She felt very uncomfortable in her heart. She did not know how to fight back. Kiki finally found an opportunity to interrupt. She tilted her head, pulled Zhang Yujie's finger, and asked curiously, "Papa? Where did Kiki's papa go? He didn't even call Kiki." "Your father is still very busy," Zhang Yujie said with a smile. "Auntie is going to visit him today. Kiki also wants to go." Kiki shouted happily. Fong Beibei's eyes lit up. She stepped forward, hugged Kiki in her arms, and asked, "Yes, I'll go with Kiki, okay?" How could Zhang Yujie be willing? It was rare for her to have the opportunity to be with Poplar Fruit. How could she be willing to let Feng Beibei get in the way? Forget it. It's only a day or two. Don't go and cause trouble for him. Zhang Yujie said, the situation there is very complicated. How can he have time to take care of you? Hearing this, Feng Beibei only felt a gust of anger rising in her heart. She raised her head and said unconvinced, what do you mean by go and cause trouble for him? We don't need him to take care of us. Moreover, I can take care of him. Come on. Zhang Yujie shook her head and said, he's not a child. Does he need you to take care of him? Use your brain and think about it. If you go, can you help? If you go, what's the use of you? Zhang Yujie had always had a temper. Her character was extremely shrewish. In addition to her family background, she usually did not care about other people's feelings when she spoke. In the past, she had bullied a lot of rich playboys in Beijing, so she treated Poplar Fruit better. Now that Poplar Fruit was not around, she would not be polite to Feng Beibei. Feng Beibei choked. She asked angrily, how am I useless? Zhang Yujie did not want to appear bad, but her temper really rose today. In addition to the grievances accumulated in the past and the resentment towards Feng Beibei, she finally exploded. What's the use of you? If you go to Jiangnan, can you help him get out of this quagmire? Zhang Yujie crossed her arms in front of her chest and said coldly, do you think we're there to play? I'm not afraid to tell you that Li Zichao's situation arose because of me, but I'm not afraid of the Li family. My father is Zheng Mingsheng, the provincial party secretary of Guangdong province. If we really want to arm wrestle, our Zheng family is not afraid of the Li family. Zhang Yujie rarely mentioned her father to others, but today she was really confused and did not choose her words carefully. I. Under Zhang Yujie's imposing manner, Feng Beibei was suppressed. She pursed her lips, and her eyes were shining. What about me? You only know how to cry. Other than crying, what else can you do? Zhang Yujie was angry and continued, I really don't understand why Poplar Fruit chose you. You look like a bean sprout, and you don't know anything. Yang Guo has achieved so much success, how much credit do you have for that? Can you be a translator for Poplar Fruit? Can you help him sell the translated books all over the world? Zhang Yujie's shrewish character could not stop at all. He wrote papers and did research projects. Those are also his own contributions. He met Artil and then went to B.A. Li. He met Mo Yang and then went to Sweden. If I hadn't dragged him out, he wouldn't have had those opportunities. Zhang Yujie said, I don't think it's all my contributions. But what did you do in all this? Chapter 1000. After a moment of silence, Feng Beibei mustered up her courage and said, I helped him with long-distance education. Throughout the entire process, she had been suppressed and was about to cry from Zhang Yujie's words. Come on. How did you help him with long-distance education? He's just setting up the framework and teaching you step by step. Zhang Yujie had been following Poplar Fruit's Weibo, so she knew some things about Poplar Fruit and Feng Beibei. Besides, I was the one who helped him with long-distance education. Zhang Yujie was unhappy and said angrily, you know Cai Simon, right? I found him in Beijing and brought him to Xiong village to find Poplar Fruit. At that time, I didn't even know where you were. Zhang Yujie had been holding this anger in her heart for a long time. She didn't like to appear so mean, but in terms of grievance, she felt that she was 100 times more wronged than Feng Beibei. She had helped Poplar Fruit so much without any complaints, but Poplar Fruit still chose another girl. She had always been unconvinced and had always wanted to ask this question, how am I worse than you? When she asked this question to Feng Beibei, Zhang Yujie's eyes turned red. The two of them quarreled so fiercely that Kiki started crying. Kiki went forward and pulled Zhang Yujie with one hand and Feng Beibei with the other. She pouted and sobbed, don't fight, Kiki doesn't want you to fight. Chen Anlan heard the commotion and rushed out. He frowned and said, stop quarreling, what are you arguing about? Can't you see that the children are crying? At this time, Feng Beibei was no longer in the mood to quarrel. She covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Zhang Yujie's last sentence had completely destroyed the thick defense she had built up in her heart. especially when Zheng Yujie accidentally mentioned a past that she didn't know about. At that time, Poplar Fruit was only pursuing her and they had not officially been together. However, Zheng Yujie had accompanied him in that harsh mountain environment. Feng Beibei felt that this matter was like a huge shadow hanging over her head, making her unable to breathe. What else happened when they were on the mountain? What else did they do behind his back? Feng Beibei was on the verge of a mental breakdown. She had been hurt in the past and was too sensitive. She felt like she was drowning in a world of lies. Without any other thoughts, Feng Beibei sat on the sofa in a trance for the whole day. She didn't know when Zheng Yujie left and how she left. She did not know how Chen Anlan managed to pacify Kiki. How did he roll up his sleeves and make breakfast, lunch, and even dinner for everyone when she was feeling listless? Feng Beibei only remembered one thing. Chen Anlan was very unhappy with Zheng Yujie. Later, when he sat down to comfort her, he asked her, "Beibei, what are you arguing about? Do you want me to talk to Brother Yang?" Chen Anlan, who was also a shrewish person, was angry at Zheng Yujie for showing off her abilities. He really wanted to complain to Poplar Fruit. No, no. Feng Beibei's dull eyes finally moved a little. She held Chen Anlan's hand and shook her head with red eyes. She looked a little sad, but her tone was very firm. She had not thought about how to tell Poplar Fruit. She had not recovered from the impact of Zheng Yujie's words. When she finally woke up at night and took a shower, she was finally able to think calmly. However, she was trapped in her own thoughts. Am I really that useless? Feng Beibei questioned herself again and again. However, Feng Beibei's answer made her feel depressed. Just like what Zheng Yujie said, her help to Poplar Fruit was really minimal. She couldn't help with her work, and she still needed Poplar Fruit's tuition for her English. How could she help? Moreover, whenever Poplar Fruit excitedly talked to her about his achievements in translating books, Feng Beibei could only calculate how much money Poplar Fruit had earned from selling so many books. Poplar Fruit would smile and pinch her nose, saying that he actually didn't care about the data. She didn't need to worry about Poplar Fruit at school. She didn't really listen to Poplar Fruit's classes. Firstly, she didn't understand. Secondly, she had her own homework to study. As for Feng Beibei, she always thought that it was a remote teaching for their small business. Now, she learned from Zheng Yujie that long before she knew about it, Zheng Yujie had already been involved. It was a bit like buying a delicious pie, only to know that your opponent had already taken a bite of it when it was just out of the oven. This feeling was so uncomfortable that it made him feel very aggrieved. Cai Simon, in addition to Poplar Fruit's relative, Fat Dragon, Poplar Fruit's most trusted technical consultant, was actually Zheng Yujie's person. What made Feng Beibei even more unbearable was that Poplar Fruit didn't tell her about Zheng Yujie's situation in Xiong village. Although Poplar Fruit didn't need to tell her everything, this was Zheng Yujie. Zheng Yujie was different from others. Feng Beibei's imagination ran wild, and she actually felt an illusion of betrayal. I must be wrong. Uncle isn't such a person. Feng Beibei shook her head and shook the illusion out of her head. However, Zheng Yujie's questioning of what's the use of you was still pestering her, making her feel a little suffocated. At night, Poplar Fruit called. He didn't know what happened to Feng Beibei, as he had been running around outside for the whole day. He went to the police station to record a statement, explain the situation, and hurried back to comfort Duan Xueqing, who wanted to die. Only now did he have time to call. Hearing Feng Beibei's lack of interest in talking on the phone, Poplar Fruit thought that she was still brooding over last night's quarrel. In order to make Feng Beibei happy, Poplar Fruit didn't tell her about today's unpleasant events, nor did he mention Zheng Yujie. Instead, he raised his spirits and told her a joke. However, Feng Beibei still responded with a simple tone, which made Poplar Fruit feel like he had punched the air. In the end, the two of them parted on bad terms. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to hope that he would make amends when he got home. How could Feng Beibei not feel the love and care that Poplar Fruit had for Feng Beibei? However, she also felt deeply uneasy about it. She was always protected by Poplar Fruit's wings. What if he left without looking back one day? She wasn't my daughter, nor was she Kiki, who could enjoy Poplar Fruit's love without thinking about returning it. What reason do you have for him to leave Zheng Yujie? Feng Beibei asked herself. It seemed that Zheng Yujie, the helper and benefactor of his career, was much more important than her. Was she really too useless? Too weak, too worthless to exist? It was as if he could just find anyone to replace him. Chapter 1001. Poplar Fruit only returned on the third day. At this time, Duan Xueqing's emotions were much calmer. At the very least, she would not try to kill herself. With the Duan family following her closely, there was no point in Poplar Fruit staying there. Li Zichao's death had indeed aroused the anger of the Li family. For a moment, Jiangnan was in turmoil, and Poplar Fruit and the others were almost swallowed up. Zheng Mingsheng played a great role in the middle. He family in Guangdong province was strong, so no one dared to stop them if they wanted to protect Poplar Fruit. At this time, the head of the Li family, Li Zichao's father, was already standing at the heart of the storm. Who knew how many eyes in the capital were staring at him? The high-ranking official in Jiangnan originally wanted to seek justice for Li Zichao. At this time, facing the decline of the Li family and the strong protection of the Zheng family and He family, he could only let go. Huang Yongning and the two special police officers who helped him became scapegoat. There was nothing they could do. Who asked them to be special police officers under Jiangnan? If they wanted to punish them, they would have to make the mistake of leaving their post without permission. Outsiders could not do anything. After being demoted, Huang Yongning later applied for a transfer to leave Jiangnan and go to Guangdong province. He family supported him there, so it was more suitable for his development than Jiangnan. As for the other two special police officers, one of them stayed in Jiangnan. Xiao Li, whose ancestral home was in Guangdong province, retired from the army and went to Guangdong province. He found Poplar Fruit according to the phone number that Poplar Fruit left him. Later, he joined the remote teaching team and led the construction team to rush between the mountains to protect the safety of the workers. Zheng Yujie returned to Guangdong province very early. She only stayed in Jiangnan for a day. Because of work, she hurried back. Big brother he stayed in Jiangnan. In the end, he took Poplar Fruit's car back. He was worried that Poplar Fruit would be taken revenge by others if he stayed in Jiangnan alone. After bidding farewell to Big Brother Poplar Fruit hurried home. Not only did he miss his daughter, but he could also feel that Feng Beibei's attitude had changed when he called home these days. She had become a little cold. It wasn't that cold, but Feng Beibei always sounded a little preoccupied and dispirited when she talked to him on the phone, but compared to her previous enthusiasm, she was indeed a lot colder now. Bao Bao, Kiki, I'm back. Poplar Fruit opened the door and called out with a smile. He smelled the rich aroma of food in the house. Obviously, Feng Beibei had forgotten to close the kitchen door. Goldie had already run over and had been harassing him to take off his shoes. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to press its head and push it to the ground. After the matter was settled, Chen Anlan and Xiong Da had already gone home, so only Feng Beibei and Kiki were left at home. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Kiki turned her head and looked. She ran over happily and shouted, "Papa!" Poplar Fruit smiled and picked up his daughter. He carried the luggage in, closed the door, and said, "Kiki, did you miss me?" He stretched out his face. Kiki immediately understood and kissed her father's face. She giggled and said, "Of course I did." At this time, Feng Beibei also came out wearing an apron. She glanced at Poplar Fruit and was very happy, but it was quickly covered by sadness. She nodded to Poplar Fruit and said, "The food will be ready soon." Then she went back to the kitchen. Poplar Fruit suddenly frowned, and his good mood disappeared without a trace. Sister Beibei is not happy. Kiki pulled her father's ear and whispered to him, "She often sits alone and thinks about life. She's so pitiful." Poplar Fruit was surprised. He smiled, grabbed Kiki's hair and rubbed it, and asked, "Think about life, who taught you this word?" "Sister Shanshan taught me." Kiki smiled and twisted her little head, looking very proud. Kiki must have inadvertently learned it when Lin Xingshan usually chatted with Feng Beibei. Poplar Fruit kissed the little fellow and smiled, "You play with Goldie first." Daddy is going to help Sister Bebe cook. Good girl. Poplar Fruit put Kiki down, patted her little butt, and turned to walk into the kitchen. Entering the kitchen, Fong Bebe was shoveling the stir-fried vegetables into a plate. Poplar Fruit walked up and gently hugged her waist from behind. Fong Bebe suddenly froze. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit reached out and held the porcelain plate for her. Otherwise, the whole plate of vegetables would have fallen into the sink. Poplar Fruit lowered his head and moved closer to Fong Bebe's ear. He kissed her slightly thin cheek gently and asked softly, "Baby, are you still angry with me?" Fong Bebe shook her head. However, Poplar Fruit felt a drop of rain splash onto the back of his hand. But how could there be a drop of rain in the house? Turning Fong Bebe's body, Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Bebe's big drops of tears. "Why are you crying?" Poplar Fruit held Fong Bebe's face and helped her wipe it. He frowned and asked, "Haven't I already gone home? What's there to be upset about? We can slowly talk about it. Why are you crying?" But Fong Bebe turned her head and looked to the side. The more gentle Poplar Fruit was, the more upset Fong Bebe felt. But when she turned her head, Poplar Fruit suddenly felt a little stifled. He didn't do anything wrong. Why did Fong Bebe look at him like this when he came back? This kind of mood continued until the dining table. Although Fong Bebe forced a smile and wanted to appear happier in front of Kiki, it was barely satisfactory. Poplar Fruit was the same. He didn't want his daughter to see the scene of adults quarreling. When it was time to wash the dishes, Poplar Fruit finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He pulled Fong Bebe into the kitchen and asked seriously, "Baby, why are you angry with me? Tell me, and we can solve it together. Why aren't you willing to tell me?" Fong Bebe turned her head away and wiped away her tears. Then she turned her head back and raised her head. Some of her hair stuck to the side of her lips, but she didn't care at all. She stubbornly looked at Poplar Fruit and said, "Last summer, Zheng Yujie, was she with you in Xiong village? How did you know?" Poplar Fruit's eyes showed surprise. He didn't know how Fong Bebe knew about this. The reason why he hid this from Fong Bebe was because he was afraid that she would think too much and be jealous. Fong Bebe thought that Poplar Fruit's surprise was panic. She sniffled, but her tears flowed even harder. She choked and said, "Don't worry about how I know. Why did you hide it from me? Tell me, was there something else that you didn't tell me at that time? I didn't tell you because I was afraid that you would think too much." Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and pressed Fong Bebe's shoulder. He said, "It's true. Nothing happened between me and her. You're still lying to me. You were on the mountain and lived together." Fong Bebe looked at Poplar Fruit, but her eyes were already blurred. "You can't say that," Poplar Fruit said in surprise. "After she came, because her room was shabby, she ran to my place to sleep. But I left Kiki behind and ran to her place to sleep. This is the absolute truth." Chapter 1002. Baby, let me tell you. Poplar Fruit held Fong Bebe's hand, and said with a serious and solemn expression, "In the past, Zheng Yujie did like me. She does now." Fong Bebe shook off Poplar Fruit's hand, and cried loudly, Yes, she does now." Poplar Fruit stepped forward, hugged Fong Bebe tightly, and held her in his arms, and said with a wry smile, "But, you don't have to care about how others do it. You should know my attitude. She said she liked me, but I never accepted it." Poplar Fruit kissed Fong Bebe's forehead, and said with a smile, "Right? In my heart, you're the only one I love, and the others are just friend." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Fong Bebe asked in a muffled voice. "If I told you, wouldn't you think too much?" Poplar Fruit repeated the answer that he had said countless times. "Really? If I liked her, I would have left with her long ago. Why would I stay by your side?" "Right. She's rich, Anne." Poplar Fruit just wanted to make a joke to show the importance of Fong Bebe in his heart. But he didn't expect that this sentence would completely ignite the powder keg. Before he finished, Fong Bebe suddenly pushed him away, and looked at Poplar Fruit in disbelief. She took 2 steps back, as if Poplar Fruit was something terrible. "So, in your heart, I'm also completely useless." Fong Bebe took a deep breath, but her tears still rolled down crazily. She said with a sobbing tone, "I'm poor, not beautiful, and don't have a good father, so I can't help you. Since I'm so useless, why do you still like me?" Poplar Fruit was also afraid at this time. He quickly took 2 steps forward, and said, "Baby, I didn't mean that." But Fong Beibei had already rushed out of the door. Poplar Fruit was stunned, and then quickly chased after her. The two of them were like a gust of wind, blowing past Kiki's back. Kiki, who was holding a few Barbie dolls and other dolls in the living room, turned around in confusion, but she only saw Poplar Fruit's figure running upstairs. "Goldie, what did you see?" Kiki stretched out her small hand, patted Goldie's head, and asked. Goldie lay on the side, squinting its eyes. From the beginning to the end, it was lazily lying its head. Only when Kiki patted it, it wagged its tail, comfortably, its wet nose. "Aya, Goldie is too lazy." Kiki pouted her small mouth, and said, "Next time, Kiki, let Papa not buy you snacks to eat." Poplar Fruit chased to the door, gently knocked on Fong Beibei's bedroom door, and said with a wry smile, "Baby, listen to my explanation, I didn't mean that." "I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen," Fong Beibei hysterically shouted from inside. Poplar Fruit tried to turn the door. It was not locked, but Fong Beibei was leaning on the door. Poplar Fruit did not dare to use force to push, and could only say, "Baby, move aside, I'll go in and talk to you slowly." "I don't want to listen, I don't want to see you," Fong Beibei cried, crying very sadly. Poplar Fruit comforted for a long time, but it did not have any effect, and his heart gradually became irritated. He rushed back from Jiangnan today, and was originally tired, but when he returned to Yangcheng, he rushed back home. Didn't he want to see Fong Beibei and Kiki? But when he returned home, he met with Fong Beibei's cold face, and also endlessly throwing tantrums. No matter how good Poplar Fruit's personality was, it was somewhat unbearable now. He kicked up, and when he landed, his slippers made a paa sound on the ground, and instantly quieted down. Poplar Fruit suppressed the irritation in his heart, sighed, and said, "Think about it carefully. I'll go and give Kiki a bath first." Walking downstairs, Poplar Fruit clapped, squeezed out a smile, and smiled at Kiki. "Kiki, come, Daddy will give you a bath." "Okay. Kiki wants to take a bath." Kiki quickly jumped up, and said in a clear voice, "But, wait for Kiki first. Kiki wants to send the Barbie doll back, otherwise, Goldie will bully her." Snore, snore. Goldie sat on its stomach, shook its head, and snorted. Who knows if it was protesting Kiki's slander. Fortunately, Chichi, this innocent and unaffected little fellow, was messing around by her side. Yangguo's mood improved a lot. After giving Kiki a bath, he carried Kiki, and let Kiki sit on the sofa in the living room with a towel wrapped around her, while he went up to get clothes for Kiki. When he came to the door again, the irritation in Poplar Fruit's heart had disappeared, and he returned to his usual gentle voice, knocked on the door and said, "Baby, open the door. I want to get clothes for Kiki." The bedroom door creaked open, but the light was not turned on. After Poplar Fruit went in and turned on the light, Fong Beibei stood there with her head down, her eyes red and swollen. Yang Guo wasn't in a hurry to get his clothes. He walked to Fang Beibei's side and lovingly lifted her messy bangs. He gently helped her wipe her tears and asked, "It's done. Don't be angry anymore. I have already apologized. Haven't you thought it through?" Fong Beibei turned her head, and did not look at him. Poplar Fruit frowned, but now was not the time to persuade her. He took the clothes downstairs, and put them on Kiki, who had thrown off her towel and was jumping on the sofa naked, before he went to Fong Beibei to continue the confrontation. The two of them sat at the foot of the bed, and after a while, Poplar Fruit was defeated. He raised his hands, and said with a bitter smile, "Okay, tell me, what do you want? I'll listen to you." Fong Beibei stared blankly to the side for a while, and then faintly threw out a sentence, "Let's break up." Poplar Fruit was stunned, and could not believe his ears. He asked, "What did you say?" "Let's break up." Fong Beibei bit her lower lip, held back her tears, and said. Poplar Fruit stood up, looked at Fong Beibei in disbelief, and asked, "Are you crazy?" "I'm serious." Fong Beibei raised her head, looked at Poplar Fruit mournfully, and said with tears in her eyes. Just now, Poplar Fruit went to give Kiki a bath, and this thought had been lingering in her heart. Or it could be said that this thought had already sprouted when Poplar Fruit was still in Jiangnan. The unequal status of the two of them, and Zhang Yujie's questioning, had always pressured her to the point that she could not breathe. Until just now, she had blurted out this sentence, and although she immediately regretted it, in the face of Poplar Fruit's questioning, the self-esteem in her heart emerged, and she did not avoid looking at Poplar Fruit. "You're crazy." Poplar Fruit's eyes were burning with anger. Really, this was the first time he looked at Fong Beibei so angrily. It had never happened before. Fong Beibei was frightened. She took 2 steps back, and curled up by the wall. Chapter 1003. Seeing that Fong Beibei was frightened by him, Poplar Fruit's heart softened. He stepped forward to support her, sighed, and said, "Baby, stop it. If you continue, I'll really be angry." "I'm not." Fong Beibei waved her arms and slapped Poplar Fruit's hand away. Poplar Fruit stiffened, and his hand stopped in the air. Fong Beibei had lost control of her emotions at this moment. She cried and shouted, "I don't want you to pity me. I'm useless. I shouldn't have monopolized you. Let's break up. Zheng Yujie is more suitable for you than me." In the end, she still screamed out those words. She screamed so hysterically that Yang Guo's heart was about to break. In this life, Poplar Fruit would never forget the painful memory of that rainy night when Lu Yunran shouted the word "break up" and then rushed into the pouring rain. He could never catch up with her, and she would never come back. Poplar Fruit thought that every minute and every second with Fong Beibei was happiness, and he would never hear the word "break up." Now he was very sad, and the pain was as painful as that rainy night. Looking at Fong Beibei's eyes, Poplar Fruit's eyes showed obvious disappointment. Poplar Fruit looked at her deeply, turned around, slammed the door, and left. When the door was closed, Fong Beibei also knelt down with tears on her face. When they went downstairs, Kiki opened her mouth and looked at her father, who was exuding cold air. She had just heard the loud bang of the door closing, and she called out in fear, "Papa." Poplar Fruit squatted down and kissed his daughter's forehead gently. He forced a smile and said, "Kiki, Dad has to go out for a while. He may come back late, or he may not come back at all. So Kiki, you have to sleep well, okay? But Kiki wants Papa to tell me a story." Kiki pouted and said unhappily, "Dad has something to do today. Tell me tomorrow." Poplar Fruit persuaded, "Dad promises to tell you a story tomorrow." Kiki thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay." Kiki is so good. Poplar Fruit kissed his daughter's face, then picked up the key and went out. He had not changed his clothes since he came home, but his mood had become very bad. When they went downstairs and got into the car, Poplar Fruit called Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, come out and drink with me." Song Jiwen did not know what was going on, so he quickly ran out. When he arrived at the barbecue stall that Poplar Fruit had mentioned, he only saw the table that Poplar Fruit had made. There were a few plates of grilled squid, roasted chicken legs, and other barbecue dishes on it, as well as 2 plates of salted and pepper peanuts. This was not the point. The point was that Poplar Fruit had 2 bottles of soda open in front of him, but the seat opposite him had 5 or 6 bottles of beer open. "Sit." Poplar Fruit pointed. Song Jiwen did not know whether to laugh or cry as he sat down and asked, "You asked me to come out and drink with you, but in the end, I drink with you, right? You know, I quit drinking." Poplar Fruit picked up a peanut and threw it directly into his mouth. Compared to the anger and discomfort he had felt when he went out, Poplar Fruit was now much calmer. "Okay." Song Jiwen sat down, took a big gulp of cold beer, and said comfortably, "Tell me, what's the matter? Why did you call me out?" Poplar Fruit did not answer directly, but said with some melancholy, "It's been a long time since the 2 of us came out to drink like this in the middle of the night, right? Isn't that right?" Song Jiwen took another big gulp of beer, and then said while chewing on the grilled squid, "After having Kiki, you completely became a house husband. Then, after having Fong Beibei, you didn't go out at all." Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly, shook his head and said, "Mosquito, tell me, am I a very fickle person?" Song Jiwen looked at him strangely and asked, "What's wrong? Did you encounter a setback in your relationship?" Poplar Fruit did not hide it, and told Song Jiwen the reason why he was angry today. He asked with a bitter smile, "Mosquito, I have never been half-hearted. Why has Bebe never believed me? Do I really look that fickle and insecure?" "Yes." Song Jiwen nodded and said. Poplar Fruit was surprised. He looked at Song Jiwen's expression, and it did not seem like he was joking. He frowned and asked, "Why do you say that?" "You are too good to women." Song Jiwen pointed the skewer at Poplar Fruit, and said while drinking, "In the past, you were always gentle and considerate to Xueqing, and then to Zheng Yujie, and even when you just met An Lan. What's wrong with being a little better? They are all my friends. I treat men and women alike." Poplar Fruit said unhappily. "Big brother, men and women are different." Song Jiwen rolled his eyes and said, "If you are so gentle to other women, they will misunderstand. It seems like you still don't understand your charm." Song Jiwen shook his head with a smile and said to Poplar Fruit, "Although you are not as handsome as me now, you are still on par with me, your sister." Poplar Fruit shook his head and laughed. Song Jiwen came over and said with a smile, "I am not bragging. When I went out to play in the past, as long as I treated a girl as gently as you, I guarantee that I would hook up with her in a few days." Seeing Poplar Fruit staring at him, Song Jiwen raised his hands with a smile and said, "Isn't this an example? You know that I have already turned over a new leaf. Although you are slightly inferior to me in terms of looks. But you are tall enough. Moreover, you are a famous person." Song Jiwen said, "If you are still so gentle and considerate to all women, not to mention Fong Bebe, even if it was anyone else who was your girlfriend, they would not feel safe." Poplar Fruit sat there in silence. Song Jiwen did not care about him. He drank a mouthful of beer and continued, "Let me take Xueqing as an example. How much did she like you in the past? But you did not know at all, right? Isn't it because you were too good to her, but you did not accept her and hurt her all over? In the end, didn't she go back home crying?" Song Jiwen was too familiar with Poplar Fruit and knew this guy's temper. If he said it harshly, it would be able to wake him up. Poplar Fruit was silent. "So, if you want to be romantic, then continue to flirt everywhere. I am using double quotes here." Song Jiwen said as he drank, "If you want harmony in your family, then do what you advised me in the past and stop flirting everywhere. Of course, this flirting is also in double quotes, because what you did was not flirting. You were too loving." Song Jiwen laughed and said, "You have to take care of yourself. Don't always be so good to women other than your girlfriend. You have to know that the one you married in the end is Bebe. If you really love her and want her to be happy, then you have to think more about her." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.